In the vast expanse of a clear blue morning, the sky is a canvas of pure potential, boundless and serene. And then, without warning, a single dark cloud begins to form on the horizon. It gathers mass, slowly, persistently, until its shadow falls over the land, obscuring the warmth of the sun. Our inner world is much the same. Consider a person, perhaps named Alex, sitting in the quiet hum of an office, or navigating the slow current of rush hour traffic. The day is ordinary, yet from somewhere deep within, a cloud begins to gather. It is a familiar cloud of anxiety, a subtle tension in the chest, a quiet whisper of worry that grows steadily louder until it dominates the entire landscape of the mind. Suddenly, the tasks at hand seem impossible, the future feels threatening, and a sense of being trapped descends like a heavy fog. This experience is not a personal failing, nor is it a sign of weakness. It is a fundamental condition of our modern lives, a storm that countless people weather in silence. The true problem lies not in the arrival of the cloud itself, but in a profound misunderstanding. We have been taught to believe that we are the cloud. When sadness visits, we say, "I am sad." When anger flares, we declare, "I am angry." We merge our identity with the fleeting weather of our minds. And so when the storm rages, we believe that we are the storm itself. In this state of identification, our natural response is to fight. We try to push the anxiety away, to argue with our sadness, to suppress our anger, hoping to force the sun to shine again. But this struggle is exhausting. The more we resist the clouds, the more power we give them, the longer they seem to linger, leaving us feeling drained, helpless, and utterly lost in the tempest. But what if there is another way to see? What if the fundamental premise of this struggle is mistaken? What if you are not the cloud, nor the storm, nor even the fleeting sunshine that follows? What if, instead, you are the sky, vast, open, and fundamentally untouched by any weather that passes through it? The wisdom of ancient Buddhist paths, particularly the quiet clarity of Zen, offers us this profound invitation. It provides not a set of beliefs to adopt, but a practical means to rediscover this sky-like nature within us. It teaches us how to become the silent, compassionate witness to our own inner world, learning to watch the inevitable clouds of thought and emotion as they arise, drift, and inevitably dissolve, all without ever leaving the calm, steady center of our own being. This is not a path of escaping life's difficulties, but of finding a deeper, more resilient peace, right in the very heart of them. To begin this journey, we must start with the most fundamental shift in perspective, a reimagining of the very ground of our being. We will call this understanding the sky and the clouds. This is more than just a beautiful metaphor. It is the key that unlocks the door to a different kind of existence, one in which peace is not something to be desperately sought after, but something to be returned to. So I invite you now to truly consider the sky, not just a quick glance upwards, but a deep, contemplative inquiry into its nature. The sky is defined by its boundless space, its inherent clarity. On a day without a single cloud, the sky is a vast, uninterrupted blue. It stretches from horizon to horizon, endlessly deep, endlessly high. It holds everything within it: the sun, the moon, the distant stars. Its fundamental quality is one of pure, silent, allowing presence. Now, consider the clouds. Clouds are transient phenomena. They are born from unseen conditions. They gather and take shape, drifting on the winds. They can be thin and wispy, like streaks of white paint. They can be magnificent and grand, towering castles of fluff in the late afternoon sun. And they can be dark, heavy and menacing, gathering into a storm front that promises thunder and lightning. They are infinitely varied, constantly changing, and utterly impermanent. The most crucial understanding in this metaphor is the relationship between the two. A dark storm cloud, no matter how violent or frightening, has no power to harm the sky. It cannot stain the sky. It cannot scar the sky. It cannot leave a single lasting mark upon the fundamental blue. The storm may rage, lightning may flash, but when the cloud eventually dissipates, as all clouds do, the sky remains just as it was before, pristine and untouched. The sky does not fight the storm cloud. It does not push it away or wish for it to be different. It simply allows it to be. It provides the space for the storm to exist, to rage, and to pass. The same is true for the most beautiful, pleasant clouds. The sky does not cling to them. It does not try to hold on to a particularly lovely formation, fearing its departure. It allows the beautiful cloud to drift by with the same impartial grace as it allows the storm. The sky's nature is equanimity. It is a state of vast, open acceptance. This, right here, is the model for our own consciousness. Your true nature, the very essence of your awareness, is the sky. Your thoughts, your memories, your moods, and most importantly, your emotions, are the clouds. This leads us to the heart of our most common and painful error, the habit of identification. Pay close attention to the language we use, for it reveals the architecture of our suffering. When a wave of profound sadness washes over us due to a loss or disappointment, we instinctively say, "I am sad." In that simple, three-word sentence, a catastrophic fusion occurs. We take a temporary, passing weather pattern, the cloud of sadness, and we equate it with the entirety of our being, the sky. We are no longer the vast consciousness, experiencing a feeling of sadness. We have become sadness itself. The sky has condensed itself down and declared, "I am this one, single, dark cloud." The same happens with anger. A flash of irritation at a perceived injustice arises, and we say, "I am angry." We become the anger. When worry about the future gnaws at us, we say, "I am an anxious person," transforming a passing state into a permanent identity, a life sentence. When this identification happens, an internal war is an immediate and inevitable consequence. If you believe you are the dark cloud, then the cloud becomes an existential threat. Its presence feels wrong, dangerous, a stain upon your very self. Your entire being mobilizes to fight it. You must destroy this sadness. You must annihilate this anxiety, because its existence feels like a negation of your own. And so we distract ourselves, we numb ourselves, we argue with our own feelings, we criticize ourselves for feeling them. We become a sky at war with its own weather, a futile and utterly exhausting battle. The wisdom of this path invites a simple but revolutionary change in our inner language. Instead of "I am sad," we can learn to observe, a feeling of sadness is present. A cloud of sadness is drifting through the sky of my awareness. Instead of "I am angry," we can notice the energy of anger is arising within me. This is not a game of semantics. It is a profound act of unfussing, of disentangling. It creates a space between the observer and the observed, and in that space, freedom is born. You are no longer the prisoner of the emotion. You are the context in which the emotion is allowed to happen. To cultivate this freedom, we must consciously step into the role of the observer. This observer, or witness consciousness, is not something you need to create. You already have it. It is the part of you that is aware that you are thinking. It is the silent presence that notices the feeling of joy or the pang of jealousy. Most of the time, this observer is dormant, overshadowed by the drama of the clouds. Our practice is to intentionally awaken it and give it prominence. Imagine you are sitting in a movie theater. For most of your life, you have believed you were one of the characters on the screen, completely lost in the drama, feeling every blow, every heartbreak, as if it were your own. The practice of becoming the observer is like a gentle realization that you are not, in fact, the character on the screen. You are the person sitting in the theater seat, watching the movie. From this new vantage point, you can still see the entire story. You can appreciate the drama, the tragedy, the comedy. You can feel empathy for the characters, but you are no longer lost in it. You know it is a movie. You know it will end. Stepping back into this seat of the observer is the first practical step. When a strong emotion arises, instead of immediately diving into it, you pause, you take a breath, and you mentally take one step back. You turn your attention inwards, not to the story behind the emotion, but to the raw physical sensation of the emotion itself. Where in your body do you feel this cloud? Is the anxiety a tightness in your chest, a knot in your stomach? Is the anger a heat in your face, a tension in your fists? You simply watch these sensations without judgment. You become a curious scientist of your own inner weather. You note the cloud's color, its texture, its intensity. You watch it as it shifts and changes, as all clouds do. In doing this, you are not suppressing or ignoring the feeling. You are doing something far more powerful. You are honoring it with your calm, non-judgmental attention. You are giving it the space to exist, and therefore, the space to pass. There is a timeless story of a young, earnest novice in a Zen monastery who was tormented by his own mind. His thoughts were a constant storm of self-doubt, craving, and fear. He felt he was failing at his practice because he could not achieve a state of perfect, uninterrupted calm. One day, in despair, he went to his old, wise master. "Master," he pleaded, "my mind is a tempest. I cannot stop the clouds. I try to force them away, but they only return stronger. What am I to do?" The old master looked at the young man's anguished face, and instead of offering a complex philosophical lecture, he simply said, "Come with me." He led the novice out of the meditation hall and into an open field, where they both lay down on the soft grass and looked up at the sky. For a long time, they watched in silence. Small, white clouds drifted lazily from one side to the other. A larger, grey cloud slowly passed overhead, briefly blocking the sun. "Tell me what you see," the master said softly. The novice described the clouds, their shapes, their speeds, their colors. The master listened patiently, and then he asked, "The large grey cloud that just passed, did it leave a stain on the blue of the sky?" "No, master," the novice replied. "And the lovely wispy clouds that came before it, did they make the sky any better or more pure than it was?" "No, master." "And when the wind blows a cloud apart, does the sky feel pain or cry out?" "Of course not, master." The old master turned his head and looked directly into the young man's eyes. "You have been acting as if you are a cloud, trying to fight off the other clouds. Your work is not to control the weather. It is to realize that you are the sky. Remember the vast, silent, and unchanging blue that you are, and let the clouds do as they will. They are not your concern." In that moment, the novice understood. The struggle was not his to win. The only path to peace was to cease fighting altogether. This is the first and most vital realization on our journey. Before we can learn about the specific nature of impermanence, Before we can delve into the roots of suffering or the power of compassion, we must first establish ourselves in this new identity. You are not the fleeting thought. You are not the temporary emotion. You are not the passing mood. You are the sky, the vast, silent, all-embracing awareness in which all of life's experiences, both painful and pleasant, are allowed to arise, to be, and to pass. With this understanding as our foundation, our unbreakable ground, we can now turn our gentle, curious gaze towards the nature of the clouds themselves. What is the universal law that governs their constant, restless movement? What is the secret that allows us to watch even the darkest storm with the knowledge that it cannot last? This brings us to the profound and deeply liberating truth of impermanence. Having established that our true nature is the vast, open sky of awareness, we now turn our gaze to the clouds themselves. We must understand the fundamental law that governs their existence, a law that applies not only to our emotions, but to every single phenomenon in the universe. This law, known in the ancient Pali language as anicca, translates to impermanence. At first glance, the idea that nothing lasts can sound melancholic or even nihilistic. It can conjure feelings of loss and futility. But this is a profound misunderstanding. Within the heart of Buddhist wisdom, the teaching of impermanence is not a source of despair. It is considered one of the most powerful and liberating truths we can ever realize. It is the secret that allows the sky to remain at peace, regardless of the weather. Our suffering often arises from a deep-seated, unspoken assumption that things should be permanent. We fall in love and wish for that blissful feeling to last forever. We achieve a success and want the satisfaction to be a permanent state. We create a moment of perfect family harmony and try to freeze it in time. On the flip side, when we are in the grips of a deep depression, we fear it will never end. When we are consumed by anxiety, it feels like a permanent feature of our personality. We live in a world that is fundamentally a flowing, dynamic river, yet we spend most of our energy trying to build solid dams, demanding that the water stand still. The teaching of anicca is not a moral judgment on this desire. It is simply a statement of fact, as neutral and unavoidable as the law of gravity. Everything that arises will, in time, pass away. Every living being is born and will one day die. Every empire rises and eventually falls. Every coastline is shaped and reshaped by the tides. And every single thought, feeling, and emotion that passes through your awareness is subject to this exact same law. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The liberation in this understanding is immense. When you stop demanding permanence from a world that cannot possibly provide it, a tremendous burden is lifted from your shoulders. You stop fighting reality. You begin to align yourself with the natural flow of life, rather than constantly swimming against the current. You learn to appreciate the beauty of the sandcastle, knowing the tide will come, which makes the act of creation itself more precious, more poignant. Let us bring this cosmic law down to the most intimate and personal level, the level of your own feelings. I invite you to bring to mind a time in your past when you were completely overwhelmed by an emotion. Perhaps it was a profound grief after a loss, a grief so heavy you felt you could not breathe. Perhaps it was a burning anger over a betrayal, an anger that consumed your every thought. Or maybe it was a period of paralyzing anxiety, where every day felt like a walk on a razor's edge. In those moments, the emotion felt absolute. It felt like the new, permanent reality. It felt as if it would last forever. Now, I ask you a simple question. Where is that feeling now, in this very moment? The memory may still be there, a scar might remain, but the raw, all-consuming, immediate intensity of that emotion has passed. It may have taken days, or weeks, or even years, but eventually, the storm cloud dissipated. Its energy dispersed. It changed. This is not a matter of philosophy. It is a direct, observable fact from your own life experience. You are living proof of anicca. The profound implication is that whatever you are feeling right now is also governed by this same unbreakable law. If you are currently experiencing a wave of sadness, know with certainty that this wave will recede. If you are in the grip of fear, know that this cloud will change its shape and drift on. It cannot last forever in its present form. Its very nature is to change. When you are in the middle of the storm, this can be incredibly difficult to believe. The mind, identified with the cloud, will scream that this time is different, that this pain will be the one that lasts forever. This is the great illusion. The practice is to gently, kindly remind yourself of the law of anicca, to whisper to yourself, this is impermanent. Like all other clouds before it, this too will change. This doesn't magically erase the pain, but it fundamentally changes your relationship to it. It transforms the pain from a life sentence into a temporary condition. It gives you the strength to endure, knowing that you don't have to bear this weight for all eternity, but only for a time. To make this understanding truly your own, you can practice observing what can be called micro-impermanence. You don't have to wait for a major emotional storm to pass to see anicca in action. The next time a feeling arises, even a mild one like boredom, irritation, or a flicker of happiness, bring the quiet attention of your inner observer to it. Instead of getting lost in the story of why you are bored, focus on the raw sensation of boredom itself. Is it a heavy feeling, a restless energy? Now, watch it closely, moment by moment. Does the intensity of the feeling stay exactly the same? Or does it pulse? Does it ebb and flow, even slightly? You will inevitably discover that it does. The cloud of emotion is not a solid, static block. It is a dynamic, shimmering process, a collection of constantly shifting energies. The tightness in your chest may loosen for a second, then tighten again. The heat of anger may flare, then briefly subside. By witnessing these tiny, moment-to-moment fluctuations, you are seeing anicca in real time. You are breaking the spell of solidity and permanence that gives emotions their terrifying power. You see them for what they are: fleeting, insubstantial weather patterns. This entire liberating wisdom is beautifully encapsulated in an ancient story about a powerful king. This king was wise and ruled over a prosperous land, but his heart was often swayed by the volatile tides of fortune. When his armies were victorious, he would be lost in ecstatic pride. When his kingdom faced drought or famine, he would fall into deep despair. Feeling this instability within himself, he summoned the wisest sages and artisans of his realm. He gave them a challenge. I want you to create for me a ring, but on this ring, you must inscribe a message that will serve me in all circumstances. It must be something that can temper my arrogance in moments of triumph and sustain me in my darkest hours of defeat. The sages offered complex philosophical treatises. The poets wrote soaring verses, but none seemed to capture the essence of what the king sought. Finally, an old, humble craftsman came forward. He presented a simple, unadorned gold band. The king looked at it, and inside the band, he saw a short inscription. It read, "This too shall pass." Years later, the king's kingdom was invaded by a powerful enemy. His armies were defeated, and he was forced to flee for his life into the wilderness. Alone, exhausted, and in utter despair, he contemplated ending his own life. Then, his fingers brushed against the ring. He remembered the inscription and read the words, "This too shall pass." A profound sense of perspective washed over him. He realized that this defeat, this despair, was not the final chapter. It was a temporary state. The words gave him the endurance to survive. He rallied his loyal subjects, led a counterattack, and eventually reclaimed his kingdom. On the day of his triumphant victory parade, as his people cheered and showered him with praise, he felt an immense wave of pride and arrogance swell within him. He felt himself to be the greatest king who ever lived. At that moment, his gaze fell upon his ring. He read the same words, "This too shall pass." A quiet humility settled over him. He understood that this victory, this moment of glory, was also just a passing cloud in the vast sky of time. The inscription had saved him from both despair and arrogance. This ancient wisdom is our ring. The understanding of impermanence is the message that centers us. It is the ultimate reality check. It prevents us from drowning in the sorrows of the moment, and it keeps us from clinging too tightly to the joys, which is its own form of suffering. It allows us to participate fully in life, to feel everything deeply, but with an underlying wisdom that knows everything is in flow. So, we are the sky, and we now understand that all clouds, by their very nature, must come and go. No rain lasts forever. But this leads to a vital and pressing question. If everything is in constant flux, if no feeling is truly permanent, then why do we still suffer so deeply? If the clouds are just passing weather, why do they hurt so much? The truth of impermanence points to the nature of the world, but it doesn't fully explain our internal reaction to it. To understand that, we must look squarely at our own minds, at our habit of resisting what is. We must examine our desperate attempts to hold on to the pleasant clouds and fight off the unpleasant ones. This brings us to the first noble truth taught by the Buddha, the fundamental reality of what he called dukkha. We have journeyed to a place of profound insight. We have begun to see ourselves not as the fleeting, turbulent clouds of emotion, but as the vast, peaceful sky in which they appear. We have also uncovered the fundamental law of the universe, anicca, the truth that all clouds, and indeed all things, are impermanent. They arise, and they pass away. And yet, this knowledge, as liberating as it is, leads to a crucial and unavoidable question. If everything is just a passing show, if no storm can truly stain the sky, why does life still hurt so much? Why is the human experience so often marked by a sense of struggle, dissatisfaction, and pain? To answer this, we must turn to the very first teaching the Buddha offered after his enlightenment. It is a teaching that is often misunderstood as pessimistic, but is in fact an act of supreme courage and compassion. It is the first noble truth, the truth of dukkha. The word dukkha is often translated from the Pali language simply as suffering. This translation, however, is incomplete and can be misleading. While dukkha certainly includes what we would call suffering, the obvious pain of sickness, old age, loss, and death, its meaning is far broader, more subtle, and more pervasive. Dukkha is better understood as a fundamental unsatisfactoriness, a low-grade yet constant hum of stress, a sense that things are never quite right, never fully resolved. It is the frustration of being stuck in traffic when you're late. It is the subtle anxiety that accompanies scrolling through social media and comparing your life to others. It is the vague disappointment that lingers after a much-anticipated event is over. It is the friction that exists between our desires and the reality of an ever-changing world. To acknowledge the truth of dukkha is not to adopt a negative worldview. It is to do what a good doctor does first: make an honest and accurate diagnosis of the condition. It is to look squarely at our experience without flinching and admit that a baseline level of stress and unease is a fundamental part of our conditioned existence. To help us understand this condition more clearly, the teachings break dukkha down into three distinct types. The first is the most obvious: dukkha, or the suffering of painful experiences. This is the raw, unmistakable pain that we all know. It is the physical pain of a migraine, a chronic illness, or a physical injury. It is the emotional pain of acute grief, when a loved one dies, the sharp sting of betrayal, the terror that arises in a moment of danger. This form of dukkha is plain to see, and no one is exempt from it. It is the unavoidable pain of life, the inherent difficulty of having a body and a mind that are vulnerable to harm and loss. The second type is more subtle and is directly linked to our previous discussion of impermanence. It is called viparinama dukkha, the suffering caused by change. This is the pain that arises from the fact that our pleasant experiences do not last. Imagine you are on a perfect vacation. The sun is warm, the scenery is beautiful, the company is joyful, the experience itself is one of happiness. Yet, even in the midst of this happiness, a subtle shadow of dukkha can appear. It is the knowledge that this vacation will end, the sadness that creeps in on the last day, the reluctance to pack your bags and return to normal life. That is viparinama dukkha. It is the pain born from our clinging to pleasant feelings and experiences. We want the beautiful cloud to stay in our sky forever, and our attachment to it, our resistance to its inevitable passing, creates a unique kind of suffering. It is the stress of holding on tightly to something that is, by its very nature, slipping through our fingers. The third type is the most profound and the most pervasive. It is called sankhara dukkha, the suffering of conditioned existence. This is the background hum of unsatisfactoriness that is woven into the very fabric of our lives, simply because we are conditioned beings in a conditioned world. Everything, including ourselves, is a temporary assembly of parts, dependent on countless other factors to exist. There is no solid, independent, permanent ground to stand on anywhere. This inherent unreliability, this fundamental groundlessness of life, creates a subtle, background anxiety. It is the stress of being a cloud that believes it is a solid, permanent object, constantly trying to maintain its shape and identity in a sky full of wind and changing atmospheric pressures. It is the deep-seated feeling that something is missing, that we are not quite whole, which in turn fuels our endless seeking for security, pleasure, and validation in a world that can never permanently provide them. Understanding these three forms of dukkha allows us to see the landscape of our lives with greater clarity. But the most powerful insight is not just in identifying dukkha, but in understanding its immediate cause. The source of our most acute suffering is not the raw event itself, but our resistance to it. Pain in life is inevitable, but suffering is largely optional. The space between inevitable pain and optional suffering is created by our mental and emotional resistance. A rainy day is just a rainy day. It is a neutral event. The raw sensory experience is one of water falling from the sky. The dukkha arises from our internal monologue about the rain. I hate the rain. It's ruining my plans. It shouldn't be raining today. Why does it always rain when I want to go out? This layer of mental commentary, this pushing against reality, this wishing that things were other than they are, that is resistance. And resistance creates tension, friction, and psychological pain. We are adding a second, unnecessary layer of suffering on top of the first, neutral event. To illustrate this crucial point, the Buddha told a simple but powerful parable. He asked his followers, if a person is walking and is suddenly struck by an arrow, is it painful? His followers replied, yes, of course, it is painful. The Buddha continued, this is the first arrow. It is the unavoidable pain of life sickness, loss, disappointment, the pain of dukkha dukkha. It is a part of being alive. Then he asked, now, what if that same person, reeling from the pain of the first arrow, then takes a second arrow and stabs himself in the very same wound? His followers were aghast. Master, they said, that would be doubly painful and utterly foolish. The Buddha looked at them with compassion and said, the second arrow is the one we shoot at ourselves. It is the arrow of our reaction. It is the arrow of blame, of self-pity, of resentment. It is the story we tell ourselves. Why me? This is unfair. This shouldn't have happened. The wise person, when struck by the first arrow, feels the pain. They tend to the wound, but they do not reach for the second arrow. They do not compound their suffering with unnecessary mental anguish. This parable is a profound gift. It shows us exactly where our work lies. We may have little control over the first arrows that life shoots at us. They are the random, impersonal weather of the world. But the second arrow is entirely within our control. We are the ones who pick it up. We are the ones who aim it. And we are the ones who can choose to put it down. The practice is to become so aware, so mindful of our own mental states, that we can catch ourselves in the very act of reaching for that second arrow. We can learn to feel the raw pain of the first arrow, the sadness, the fear, the physical discomfort, without adding the story, without adding the resistance. We can learn to be with the rain, without cursing the sky. To acknowledge the truth of dukkha, then, is not an act of pessimism. It is an act of profound self-compassion and clarity. It is the brave first step of looking at our condition without illusion. By understanding that life contains unavoidable discomfort, and by seeing clearly our own habit of amplifying that discomfort with resistance, we stop blaming ourselves and the world. We stop asking, why is this happening? And we start asking, how can I relate to this with wisdom and grace? We have diagnosed the condition. We have seen the symptom of dukkha in its various forms. The next logical step in any healing journey is to understand the root cause. What is the precise force within us that compels us to resist reality? What is the mechanism that makes us cling so tightly to pleasure and push so fiercely against pain, thus making us reach for that second arrow every single time? This inquiry leads us directly to the second noble truth, the origin of dukkha, a powerful, deep-seated drive the Buddha identified as tanha, craving, thirst, and clinging. Having courageously faced the diagnosis of our condition, the fundamental unsatisfactoriness known as dukkha, we are now poised to take the next critical step. Like a skilled physician who moves from identifying a fever to searching for its underlying cause, we must now look deeper. We have seen the second arrow, the layer of suffering we add to our own pain. But we must ask, what is the force that makes us reach for that arrow? What is the engine that drives our resistance to reality, our desperate struggle against the natural weather of our lives? The Buddha identified this force with a single, potent word, tanha. Translated from Pali, tanha means thirst. It is not a casual want or a mild preference. It is a deep, primal, and relentless craving that lies at the very root of our being. It is the unquenchable thirst for things to be different than they are. It is the force that compels us to grasp at what we find pleasant and to violently push away what we find unpleasant. This tanha is the unseen puppeteer pulling the strings of our reactions, and understanding its mechanisms is the key to cutting ourselves free. To grasp the full scope of this thirst, the teachings illuminate its three primary forms. The first, and most familiar, is kama tanha, the craving for sensory pleasure. This is the thirst of our five senses. It is the craving for the taste of delicious food, the desire to hear beautiful music, the longing for a pleasant fragrance, the need to see beautiful sights, and the powerful pull of pleasurable physical touch. Our entire consumer culture is a grand temple built in honor of kama tanha. Advertisements constantly stimulate this thirst, promising that the next purchase, the next experience, the next vacation will finally quench it. We are caught in a relentless cycle of seeking the next hit of pleasant sensation. We finish one delicious meal and immediately start thinking about the next. We finish one episode of a captivating show and our mind is immediately thirsty for another. This is not a moral failing. It is a deep, biological, and psychological drive. It is the simple, powerful thirst for what feels good. The second form of this thirst is more subtle and psychological. It is bhava tanha, the craving for being or becoming. This is the thirst of the ego. It is the deep desire for a solid, continuous, and often impressive identity. It is the craving to be something, to become more. This thirst fuels our ambition, our desire for fame, wealth, power, and status. It manifests as the need to be seen as intelligent, successful, attractive, or righteous. In our modern world, it is the craving for likes on social media, for a promotion at work, for a larger house, or a more prestigious title. It's the desire to build a legacy, to leave a mark, to ensure that our particular cloud formation is remembered long after it has passed. But it also exists in more subtle forms. It is the simple craving for our life to continue, the fear of death, and the deep need to believe in a stable, unchanging me at the center of our experience. Bhava tanha is the architect of the self, constantly seeking materials to build and fortify its identity against the winds of impermanence. The third form is perhaps the most surprising, yet it is the direct engine of the second arrow. It is vibhava tanha, the craving for non-being or annihilation. This is the flip side of the coin, the intense thirst for something to go away. When we experience a painful emotion like shame, deep anxiety, or grief, vibhava tanha is the powerful urge that arises, screaming, "I want this feeling to stop. I can't stand it." It is the craving to annihilate the painful experience. It can be directed outwards, as the desire for a difficult person to disappear from our life, or the wish that a painful memory could be completely erased. But most often, it is directed inwards. It is the energy of aversion, of pushing away, of resistance. At its most extreme and tragic, this craving for non-existence can manifest as self-harm or suicidal thoughts, the ultimate desire to annihilate the self to escape from unbearable pain. This intense aversion to our own inner weather is as powerful a thirst as the craving for pleasure. Here we can see the two-sided nature of this trap, bringing us back to our sky and clouds. Tanha operates like a hand that desperately tries to manipulate the weather. When a beautiful, white, fluffy cloud of happiness or joy drifts into our sky, kama tanha and bhava tanha are activated. Our hand shoots up to grasp it, to hold on to it. We cling to the pleasant feeling, and in that very act of clinging, we introduce suffering. We are no longer simply enjoying the cloud. We are now anxious about it leaving. The joy becomes tinged with the fear of its own impermanence. This is the suffering of change. Conversely, when a dark, stormy cloud of sadness, anger, or fear appears, Vibhava Tanha is triggered. Our hand shoots up not to grasp, but to push. We fight the cloud. We deny its existence. We try to force it out of our sky. This act of pushing, of resistance, is the second arrow. The initial pain of the cloud is compounded by the enormous tension and suffering of our struggle against it. Both actions grasping and pushing are born from the same fundamental thirst, the same refusal to accept the natural, impermanent flow of life. There is a classic story that perfectly illustrates how this mechanism of grasping becomes our cage. In some parts of the world, hunters have a simple method for trapping monkeys. They take a coconut or a hollowed-out gourd and drill a hole in it just large enough for a monkey's open hand to fit through. Inside the gourd, they place a handful of rice or some other sweet treat. They then secure the gourd to the base of a tree. Soon enough, a monkey comes along, smells the treat, and slips its open hand into the hole. It grasps the rice, forming a fist. But now, the hole that was large enough for an open hand is too small for a closed fist. The monkey pulls and pulls, screeching in frustration, but it cannot get its hand out. The hunter can then calmly approach. At any moment, the monkey could be free. All it has to do is open its hand, release the rice, and slip its hand out. But its tanha, its powerful, instinctual craving for the treat, is so strong that it will not let go. It is trapped not by the gourd, but by its own clinging fist. The monkey does not realize that the very thing it desires is the cause of its imprisonment. We are that monkey. The rice is the fleeting pleasure we cling to, or the stubborn resistance we refuse to release. The hunter is dukkha, the suffering that inevitably follows our clinging. We are trapped by our own thirst. This thirst creates a self-perpetuating cycle, a feedback loop of suffering. A craving arises. We act on it. If we get what we want, we experience a brief moment of pleasure, which quickly fades, leading the original thirst to return, often even stronger. If we don't get what we want, we experience frustration and disappointment, which also fuels our craving, our thirst for things to be different. We are running on a hamster wheel, fueled by tanha, constantly chasing a satisfaction that, by its very nature, can never be permanent. To see this mechanism clearly is not a cause for despair. It is profoundly hopeful. It is the moment when the prisoner finally understands the nature of his own cell door. The problem is not the walls of the prison, but the lock. And the lock is our own clinging. If we can find the key to this lock, we can walk free. If the diagnosis is dukkha and the cause of the disease is tanha, then the prognosis for a cure is, for the first time, truly possible. If the source of our entrapment is the tightly clenched fist of grasping, then the path to freedom must lie in the gentle, courageous, and deeply wise act of releasing our grip. This does not lead us to a cold and empty state of indifference. It leads us to a warm, engaged, and liberated way of being. It brings us to the profound and healing art of letting go. We have now walked through the clinical portion of our inner diagnosis. We have looked honestly at the condition of dukkha, the pervasive unsatisfactoriness of life. We have identified its root cause, the deep and relentless thirst of tanha, the clinging fist that grasps at pleasure and pushes away pain. To know the cause of an ailment is a moment of great hope, for it allows us to formulate a cure. The prescription offered by the wisdom of the ages is captured in a phrase that is as simple as it is profound: let go. These two words are perhaps the most misunderstood in all of spiritual practice. To our modern ears, conditioned to value striving, ambition, and control, letting go can sound like an admission of defeat. It can be mistaken for apathy, for weakness, for a cold indifference, or for simply giving up. But this is a complete misreading of its power. The art of letting go is not an act of passivity. It is a conscious, courageous, and deeply intelligent act. It is not an abandonment of life, but a radical way of engaging with it more fully and freely. It is the art of unclenching the fist that has kept us trapped. First, we must be absolutely clear about what letting go is not. It is not suppression. Suppression is an act of violence against ourselves. When a painful emotion like anger or grief arises, the strategy of suppression is to take that feeling and shove it down into the basement of our consciousness. This requires enormous and continuous effort, like holding a beach ball underwater. For a while, we may succeed in keeping it hidden, but the pressure is always building. And eventually, inevitably, the feeling will burst forth, often with far more force than it originally had. Letting go is the complete opposite. It is the act of allowing the beach ball to gently float on the surface of the water. You see it, you acknowledge its presence, you feel its bobbing motion, but you do not feel the need to grab it or to shove it away. You simply let it be. Letting go is also not the same as ignoring. To ignore a feeling is another form of aversion, a subtle manifestation of vibhava tanha, the craving for something not to exist. It is turning your back on a part of your own experience. Letting go is a gesture of profound inclusion. It is turning towards the feeling with a gentle and spacious awareness and saying, without words, I see you. You are welcome here. You are allowed to exist. In this gesture of allowing, the feeling is robbed of its power to control us. It is no longer an intruder to be fought, but simply a guest, a passing cloud that is allowed its moment in our sky. This leads us to another crucial distinction: the difference between letting go and giving up. Giving up comes from a place of despair. It is the final, exhausted sigh of the ego that has been fighting a battle and feels it has lost. When we say, I give up on my anxiety, we are still deeply identified with the struggle. We are a defeated warrior laying down our arms. It is an act born of powerlessness. Letting go, however, comes from a place of wisdom. It is the recognition that the battle itself was a mistake. It is not about abandoning our effort to be well. It is about abandoning the futile strategy of inner warfare. Letting go is like being in a tug of war with a monster. You are pulling and straining with all your might, your muscles burning, your feet slipping. Giving up is collapsing in exhaustion, letting the monster drag you into the mud. Letting go is the sudden, brilliant insight to simply drop the rope. The monster, with no opposing force, stumbles away, and you are suddenly, unexpectedly free. You did not lose the fight, you transcended it. Giving up is an admission of defeat. Letting go is a declaration of freedom. This art can be applied to every corner of our lives, transforming our relationship with the past, the future, and the present moment. We can practice letting go of the past. This means releasing our tight grip on regret and resentment. Regret is the act of mentally reliving a past mistake over and over, lashing ourselves with the story of, I should have done things differently. Resentment is the act of reliving a past hurt, constantly reopening a wound by focusing on how someone else wronged us. Letting go of the past does not mean condoning harmful behavior or forgetting important lessons. It means understanding that we are poisoning our present moment with the dead venom of a past that cannot be changed. It is the conscious choice to put down the heavy sacks of yesterday so that we may walk freely today. We can also practice letting go of the future. This means releasing our anxious attachment to specific outcomes. We can plan, we can work with diligence and intention, but we must learn to let go of our desperate need for things to turn out exactly as we have imagined. This anxiety about the future prevents us from being fully present in the only moment we ever truly have, right now. Letting go of the future is an act of trust. Trust in our ability to handle whatever comes, and trust in the flow of life itself. This practice is perhaps most beautifully illustrated in the celebrated story of two Zen monks, one old and one young, who were on a long pilgrimage. Their monastic vows strictly forbade them from touching a woman. After walking for many hours, they came to a river where a young woman in fine clothes stood weeping. The river had flooded, and she could not cross without ruining her silk kimono. Without a word, the old monk walked up to her, lifted her onto his back, carried her across the swirling river, and gently set her down on the other side. He then bowed and continued his journey. The young monk was utterly scandalized. He was speechless with indignation. For the next several hours, he walked behind his master in fuming silence. He stewed in his judgment, replaying the scene in his mind. He rehearsed the sermons he would deliver, the rules that had been broken, the impurity of the act. His mind was a tempest of righteous anger. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, he burst out, "Master, how could you do that? You know our vows forbid us to even go near a woman, let alone touch one. You have broken our sacred precepts." The old monk turned to him, his face calm and compassionate. He looked at his agitated disciple and replied softly, "I put that woman down on the other side of the river hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This story is a perfect teaching on the art of letting go. The old monk performed an action, a compassionate response to the need of the moment. And then he released it completely. His mind was as clear and untroubled as it was before. The young monk, however, did not carry the woman physically, but he carried the idea of her, the judgment of the act, the story about the broken rule. In his mind for hours, he was clinging to a mental object, a thought cloud, and it was this clinging, not the event itself, that was the source of his profound suffering. He was carrying a ghost. Most of our suffering is exactly this. We are not burdened by reality itself, but by the stories, judgments, regrets, and worries we insist on carrying long after the event has passed. Letting go is the art of putting down what is no longer there. It is the antidote to Dharma. It is the unclenching of the fist, the dropping of the rope, the releasing of the ghost. It is the beginning of true peace. But as we stand here, with this liberating possibility before us, a practical question arises. How? How do we actually do this? It is easy to say, let go. But when we are in the grip of a powerful emotion or a deeply ingrained habit of thought, it can feel impossible. Letting go is not simply an intellectual decision. It is a skill, a mental muscle that must be trained. We cannot let go of a rope we do not realize we are holding. First, we must become aware of the tension in our own fist. We need a tool that can illuminate our inner world with a gentle, non-judgmental light, allowing us to see our own clinging in action. What is this tool that allows us to watch the mind without getting lost in its stories? What is the practice that builds the muscle of awareness, the very foundation upon which the art of letting go is built? This brings us to the heart of the path, the indispensable practice that makes all this transformation possible. It brings us to the gentle, moment-to-moment cultivation of what is known as sati, or mindfulness. We have arrived at a pivotal turning point on our inner journey. We have seen that the path to freedom from our own suffering lies in the wise and courageous art of letting go, of unclenching the fist of tanha. But this immediately presents a practical challenge. How can we let go of a rope we don't even realize we are holding? How can we release our grip on a thought or a feeling if we are completely lost within it? To let go, we must first see. We need a light, a gentle, illuminating torch that we can shine into the inner landscape of our minds to see what is actually there. We need an anchor that can hold us steady when the winds of emotion begin to howl. This light, this anchor, is the practice of mindfulness. In the Pali language, the word is sati, which carries the beautiful connotation of to remember. Mindfulness is simply the art of remembering to be present. It is not a mystical state or a complex intellectual theory. It is a fundamental human capacity that we all possess, a simple, practical skill that can be cultivated through practice, like learning to play an instrument or strengthening a muscle. At its core, mindfulness is the ability to pay attention, on purpose, in the present moment, without judgment. Let us unpack that simple definition, for every word is crucial. Paying attention means we are consciously directing our focus, rather than letting it be hijacked by every passing distraction. On purpose means this is an intentional act, a choice we are making. In the present moment is the absolute heart of the practice. Our minds have a powerful default tendency to live anywhere but here. They are either wandering in the past, replaying old conversations, dwelling on regrets, and clinging to memories, or they are rocketing into the future, rehearsing upcoming events, worrying about what might go wrong, and fantasizing about what we desire. The past and future are realms of thought, realms of clouds. The present moment is the only place life ever actually happens. It is the sky, finally, and most importantly, without judgment. This means we learn to observe our experience as it is, without immediately slapping a label of good or bad, right or wrong, like or dislike onto it. This non-judgmental quality is what makes mindfulness a practice of supreme kindness and acceptance. It is vital to understand that mindfulness is not about stopping our thoughts or emptying our mind. This is perhaps the most common misconception, and it leads to a great deal of frustration. The goal is not to have a perfectly clear sky, free of all clouds. The goal is to become the sky itself, aware of the clouds as they pass, without being swept away by them. You are not trying to create a blissful trance state or escape from reality. You are learning to be fully present with reality, exactly as it is. The untrained mind is like a small boat on a vast, churning ocean without a rudder or an anchor. It is tossed about mercilessly by every wave that comes along. A wave of memory from the past can pull it backwards into regret. A wave of anxiety about the future can pull it forwards into a storm of fear. A wave of sensory desire can pull it sideways towards a fleeting island of pleasure. The boat is completely at the mercy of the changing sea of conditions. Mindfulness is the practice of repeatedly dropping an anchor. When the anchor is down, the boat is still on the ocean. The waves still rise and fall. The wind still blows. But the boat is no longer carried away. It has a point of stability, a reference point that holds it steady amidst the chaos. The anchor does not stop the storm, but it changes the boat's relationship to the storm entirely. In our practice, our anchor is the present moment, and the most reliable way to access the present moment is through the simple, miraculous reality of our own breath. This core practice is known as anapanasati, or mindfulness of breathing. The reason the breath is such a perfect anchor is because it is always with us, and it is always happening now. You cannot take a breath in the past. You cannot take a breath in the future. Your breath is a physical, tangible sensation that is a constant, reliable marker of the present moment. The practice itself is beautifully simple. First, you find a posture that is both comfortable and alert. You can sit on a cushion on the floor, or you can sit upright in a chair with your feet flat on the ground. The key is to keep your back straight but not stiff, allowing the energy to flow freely. You can gently close your eyes, or if you prefer, lower your gaze to a neutral spot on the floor in front of you. Then, you simply bring your attention to the physical sensation of breathing. You don't need to change your breath or control it in any way. Just allow it to be natural. You might choose to rest your attention at the tip of your nostrils, feeling the cool air enter and the warm air leave. Or you might focus on the rise and fall of your chest, or the gentle expansion and contraction of your abdomen. Choose one spot and let your attention rest there, as if it were a butterfly landing gently on a flower. Now comes the most important part of the instruction. After a few seconds, or perhaps a minute if you are lucky, your mind will wander, a thought will arise, a sound will distract you, a plan will form, a worry will surface. This is not a mistake. It is not a failure of your practice. It is simply what minds do. The moment you realize, oh, my mind has wandered, that moment of realization is a moment of pure mindfulness. You have woken up, and in that moment, without any scolding or judgment, you gently and kindly guide your attention back to the anchor of the breath. That is the entire practice. You sit, you pay attention to the breath. Your mind wanders. You notice it has wandered. You gently bring it back, over and over and over again. The practice is not about staying perfectly focused on the breath. The practice is in the gentle, patient, compassionate act of returning. Each time you return your attention to the breath, you are strengthening the muscle of mindfulness. You are performing one more repetition of a sacred exercise, training your mind to be more stable, clear, and kind. There is a helpful story that illustrates the quality of mind we are cultivating. Imagine your mind is a great city, and at its main gate sits a wise and patient gatekeeper. The gatekeeper's only job is to be aware of everyone who enters and leaves the city. He does not try to control who comes and goes. When a farmer comes in from the fields, the gatekeeper simply notes, a farmer is entering. When a rich merchant leaves the city, he notes, a merchant is leaving. If a crying child runs out, or a panicked soldier runs in, his job remains the same, to simply note what is happening without getting involved. He doesn't run after the merchant to ask about his business. He doesn't get swept up in the soldier's story of alarm. He doesn't try to console the crying child. He just sits, present and aware. His job is not to police the traffic, but simply to know it. A mindful mind is like this gatekeeper. It learns to sit with a quiet presence and note the comings and goings of thoughts and feelings. Ah, anxiety is here. A memory of yesterday is arising. A feeling of peace is present. We note their arrival, we note their presence, and we note their departure, all without leaving our post at the gate. This powerful practice does not need to be confined to a cushion. We can weave moments of mindfulness into the fabric of our entire day. This is known as informal practice. You can practice mindful eating. Instead of consuming your meal on autopilot, take one bite and give it your full attention. Notice its colors, its smells, its textures in your mouth, the complex flavors as you chew. You can practice mindful walking. As you walk from your car to your office, feel the sensations of your feet making contact with the ground. Feel the rhythm of your own movement. You can practice mindful listening. The next time you are in a conversation, try to listen with your whole being, without simultaneously planning what you are going to say next. Listen to understand, not just to reply. Each of these small moments is an opportunity to drop your anchor, to come back home to the present, to strengthen your capacity for awareness. Mindfulness, then, is the foundational skill that makes everything else possible. It is the light that allows us to see the clinging fist of tanha. It is the anchor that gives us the stability to ride out the storms of dukkha. It is the gentle presence that allows us to practice the art of letting go. With this essential tool now firmly in our grasp, we are prepared to undertake the more delicate and direct work of healing. We are now equipped to turn this clear, kind, and non-judgmental awareness towards the most challenging weather patterns our inner world can produce. We are ready to learn how to be with our most difficult emotions without being consumed by them. We are ready to sit peacefully with the storm. We have now arrived at the very heart of the practice, the place where all our preparation meets the raw reality of our inner world. We have recognized ourselves as the sky, understood the impermanent nature of the clouds, seen how our clinging fist of tanha causes our suffering, and discovered the liberating power of letting go. We have also found our anchor in the gentle, moment-to-moment practice of mindfulness. With this anchor of sati firmly in hand, we are now equipped to perform one of the most courageous and transformative acts possible. We are ready to stop running from the storm. Instead of seeking shelter or trying to command the weather, we are going to learn how to sit peacefully in the rain. We are going to turn our gentle, curious awareness directly towards our most difficult emotions. This may sound frightening. Our entire life has been a training in the opposite direction, to distract, to numb, to suppress, to escape. To consciously turn towards our pain feels counterintuitive, like walking back into a burning building. But the wisdom of this path teaches us that the only way out is through, and that the fire we fear is not as solid as it appears. This is not an act of aggression, but one of profound kindness. We are not going to fight our emotions. We are going to meet them, listen to them, and hold them in a spacious, compassionate embrace. This practice can be broken down into 4 clear, sequential steps. Think of it as a gentle protocol for emotional first aid. It is a process you can turn to whenever you feel the inner weather begin to shift, whenever a dark cloud starts to gather on the horizon. The first step is to recognize. This is the initial moment of mindfulness, the flicker of sati, where you wake up to what is happening within you. Instead of being completely swept away by a rising tide of feeling, you simply notice it. You mentally, or even softly under your breath, name what is present. Ah, this is anger. Sadness is here. This is the feeling of fear. This simple act of naming is incredibly powerful. It immediately creates a sliver of space between you, the observer, and the emotion, the observed. The feeling is no longer a vague, monstrous presence that has consumed you. It is now a specific event that you are witnessing. You have brought it out of the shadows and into the light of awareness. The key here is to name it gently, without judgment. It is not an accusation, but a simple, factual acknowledgement, like a meteorologist noting, a cold front is moving in. The second step, once you have recognized the emotion, is to allow. This is where we consciously practice the art of letting go. Having named the feeling, you now give it permission to be there. You stop fighting it. You drop the internal tug of war. You can say to yourself, it's okay. This feeling of anxiety is allowed to be here for a while. Sadness has permission to stay. This step is utterly revolutionary. because it is the direct antidote to the resistance that creates the second arrow. You are not saying that you like the feeling or that you want it to stay forever. You are simply acknowledging the reality of the present moment. Right now, this feeling is here. By allowing it, you are ending the inner battle. The enormous amount of energy you normally expend on pushing the feeling away is now conserved. The tension of resistance begins to soften, and a sense of inner spaciousness begins to open up. You are the sky, giving the storm cloud permission to exist within your vastness. The third step is to investigate. This is where we engage our natural curiosity, but in a very specific way. We are not investigating the story behind the emotion. Our minds will desperately want to do this, to get lost in the narrative of who did what to whom and why I have a right to feel this way. This narrative is the fuel that keeps the emotional fire burning. Instead, we gently shift our attention away from the story in our head and turn towards the direct, physical sensations of the emotion in our body. We investigate the feeling as a raw, physical energy. With a kind and gentle curiosity, you can ask yourself, where does this feeling live in my body right now? Is the anxiety a tightness in your chest, a hollow feeling in your stomach, a restlessness in your legs? Is the anger a heat in your face and neck, a clenching in your jaw and fists? What is its texture? Is it sharp and stabbing, or dull and heavy? Does it have a temperature? Does it vibrate or pulse? Or is it a solid, static block? You explore these sensations not to analyze them or get rid of them, but simply to know them. You become a gentle, inner scientist, mapping the physical landscape of the emotion. This act of investigation grounds you firmly in the present moment, reality of your body, and further disentangles you from the powerful grip of the mental story. The fourth and final step is non-identification, which is nurtured by compassion. After recognizing, allowing, and investigating the emotion as a set of changing physical sensations, a profound realization can begin to dawn. This collection of energies, this tightness, this heat, this vibration, it is not you. It is an impersonal, conditioned process happening within you. You are the awareness that is experiencing these sensations. You are the sky that holds the cloud. This realization of non-identification is the ultimate freedom. To nurture this, you can offer a gesture of kindness to the part of you that is hurting. You can place a hand gently over your heart and offer yourself a message of compassion, such as, "This is a moment of suffering. It is difficult to feel this way." You are shifting your identity from being the victim of the storm to being the compassionate caregiver for your own heart. You are treating your inner pain not as an enemy, but as a wounded friend. Imagine being caught in a huge ocean wave. To be lost in an emotion is to be tumbled by that wave, disoriented, powerless, gasping for air, not knowing which way is up. This four-step practice is like learning to surf. The wave of emotion is still just as powerful. The energy is still there. But by practicing these steps, you learn to get on the surfboard of mindfulness. You stay connected to the wave's energy. You move with it, but you are no longer consumed by it. You are riding it with a sense of balance, skill, and even grace. The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh offers another beautiful image for this practice. He teaches that we should learn to hold our anger and our fear the way a loving mother holds her crying baby. A good mother does not get angry at her baby for crying. She doesn't scold it or throw it out of the house. She hears the cry. She immediately stops what she is doing, and she goes to the baby. She picks it up tenderly. She holds it in her arms, and in holding it, she is trying to understand what is wrong. Is the baby hungry? Is it cold? Does it have a pain somewhere? This is how we should learn to treat our own emotions. When anger arises, We can say, "Hello, my little anger. I see that you are here. I will stop and take care of you. Let me hold you and see what it is you are trying to tell me." This simple act of turning towards our pain with the tenderness of a mother transforms everything. The enemy becomes a child in need of care. Difficult emotions derive most of their power from being feared, from being unknown monsters lurking in the basement of our minds. This practice is simply the act of taking a flashlight, walking slowly down the stairs, and turning on the light. When we finally look, we discover that there is no monster. There is only a collection of fleeting, impersonal bodily sensations, a flurry of thoughts, and a vulnerable part of ourselves that is calling out for attention and compassion. By observing our emotions in this way, we tame them. Their power to overwhelm us dissolves in the warm, steady light of our mindful, caring presence. This four-step method is a universal key, a way to meet any emotion that arises. Now, with this key in our hand, let us approach one of the most common and challenging rooms in the modern mind. Let us apply this gentle, courageous practice directly to the pervasive and often paralyzing storm cloud of anxiety. With the universal key of our four-step practice in hand, let us now approach one of the most common and challenging weather systems of the modern mind. This is a cloud that can manifest as a subtle, low-grade static of unease, a background hum of dread that colors an entire day. Or it can gather with terrifying speed into a full-blown hurricane of panic, leaving us feeling helpless, breathless, and lost. This, of course, is the cloud of anxiety. For so many of us, anxiety is not a rare occurrence, but a frequent and unwelcome companion. We will now use the gentle tools of recognition, allowance, investigation, and non-identification to better understand and transform our relationship with this pervasive state of being. The first step, as always, is to recognize the nature of what we are dealing with. What is anxiety truly? At its core, anxiety is a story. It is a story about a future that has not yet happened, and it is almost always a story with a negative ending. Anxiety is a function of the imagination, projecting our consciousness out of the present moment and into a fictional timeline where things go wrong. Its fuel is the insidious, two-word question, what if? What if I fail this presentation? What if they think I'm foolish? What if I get sick? What if I lose my job? Each what if is the mind creating a ghost, a phantom scenario, and then reacting to that phantom as if it were real. The body doesn't know the difference between a real threat and a vividly imagined one. So, when the mind tells a story of future catastrophe, the body responds accordingly. The heart rate increases, the breath becomes shallow, muscles tense, and the fight or flight system is activated. The first step in decoding anxiety is to recognize this process as it happens. It is to catch ourselves in the act of storytelling and to gently say, "Ah, this is anxiety. The mind is telling a scary story about the future right now." Simply seeing it as a story, rather than a prophecy, begins to loosen its grip. Since anxiety lives exclusively in the imagined future, the most direct and powerful antidote is to return the mind to the only place it cannot survive, the solid ground of the present moment. This is where we practice allowing and investigating. When you notice the anxious stories beginning to spin, the first impulse is to fight them or get lost in them. Instead, we can try something different. First, you allow the anxious energy to be there. You don't have to like it, but you stop the war against it. Okay, anxiety is present. Let it be here for a moment. Then, you gently but firmly unhook your attention from the what if narrative in your head and you anchor it in the physical reality of the now. The most reliable anchor is your breath. Bring your full attention to the feeling of the breath entering your body and the feeling of the breath leaving your body. Feel the air on your nostrils right now. Feel your abdomen rise and fall right now. If your mind gets pulled back into the future story, which it will, you just gently, patiently guide it back to the breath. You can also use other present moment, physical sensations, as an anchor. Feel the solid ground beneath your feet. Feel the weight of your body sitting in the chair. Notice the feeling of your hands resting in your lap. Listen to a sound in the room without labeling it, just hearing the raw vibration. Then, you can begin to investigate the physical signature of anxiety itself. Without the story, what is anxiety as a pure bodily sensation? Is it a jittery, vibrating energy in your chest? A cold, hollow feeling in your stomach? A tightness in your throat? A tension in your shoulders? Explore these sensations with a kind, curious attention. You will notice that these sensations are not static. They pulse, they change, they intensify and subside. By staying with the physical reality, you starve the future story of the attention it needs to survive. You are bringing your mind home, out of the phantom future and into the reality of your living body. A powerful technique to support this process and deepen the step of non-identification is the practice of specific naming. Instead of just labeling the whole undifferentiated mass as anxiety, you can become more precise. As a thought stream about work arises, you can note, a worry about the deadline. When you are about to enter a social situation, you can note, this is the feeling of social anxiety. If you are worried about your health, you can note, a thought about illness is present. This specific naming acts like a scientist, categorizing different types of clouds. It breaks down the big, scary, monolithic anxiety monster into a series of smaller, distinct, and observable mental events. It creates a profound sense of distance and clarity. When you name it, you are implicitly taking the position of the one who is observing it, which reinforces the truth that you are not the anxiety itself. You are the spacious awareness in which the thought stream of worry is unfolding. You are the scientist, not the specimen. Ultimately, to find a deep and lasting peace with anxiety, we must gently address its philosophical root, which is our profound intolerance for uncertainty. Our anxious mind desperately wants a guarantee. It wants to know for sure that we will be safe, that we will be successful, that we will not be hurt, that everything will be okay. The truth of life, the truth of Anika, is that no such guarantee can ever be given. Life is fundamentally uncertain, unpredictable, and uncontrollable. The ultimate freedom from anxiety does not come from finally getting the guarantee we crave. It comes from learning to be comfortable with not having one. It is about relaxing our need to know and learning to rest in the mystery. There is a story of a wise old farmer whose neighbors were always in a state of anxiety about the weather. They worried when it was too dry, and they worried when it was too wet. Yet this farmer was always seen to be at peace. One day, a neighbor asked him, "How can you be so calm? Aren't you worried that this lack of rain will ruin your crops?" The farmer smiled and replied, "I cannot control the clouds. Worrying will not make it rain. My work is to tend my fields today. I can dig my irrigation channels to prepare for the sun, and I can clear my drainage ditches to prepare for the rain. What the weather does is not my business. My business is to be prepared for both." We must learn to become like this farmer. Our work is not to control the uncontrollable future, Our work is to tend to the field of the present moment. We can act with prudence, kindness, and wisdom right now. We can prepare for various outcomes. But then, we must let go. We must release our attachment to a specific result. Peace is found not in a secure future, but in a wise and wholehearted engagement with the present. It is the deep acceptance that we can never know what the next moment will bring, and the realization that this is not a terrifying problem, but a simple fact of life. By understanding that anxiety is just a story about the future, by using the anchor of the present moment to pull us out of that story, by naming our worries to gain distance, and by gently, patiently, learning to embrace the inescapable uncertainty of life, we transform our relationship with this difficult emotion. We learn that we do not have to be the victim of this cloud. We can become the calm, open sky that allows it to pass, knowing that our true home is not in the imagined storms of tomorrow, but in the quiet, solid ground of right now. And just as anxiety so often pulls our minds into the future, another powerful and fiery emotion frequently chains us to the hurts of the past or the frustrations of the present. Let us now turn our compassionate, mindful awareness to this turbulent and often misunderstood energy, the cloud of anger. Having explored the forward-leaning, future-oriented cloud of anxiety, we now turn our attention to an energy that is altogether different. It is a cloud that can gather in an instant, a thunderhead crackling with heat and power. It often erupts in the present moment, a fiery reaction to a perceived wrong, or it can smolder for years, chaining us to the hurts and injustices of the past. This is the potent and profoundly misunderstood cloud of anger. In our society, anger is often seen as a purely negative, destructive force to be either shamefully suppressed or recklessly indulged. But the path of wisdom offers a third way. It invites us to view anger not as an enemy to be vanquished, but as a powerful and often misguided messenger. Our task is not to destroy the messenger, but to learn to be still, to listen to the thunder of its message, and to wisely channel the lightning of its energy. The first and most crucial step in transforming our relationship with anger is to recognize that it is often a secondary emotion. Like a fierce and loyal bodyguard, anger frequently rushes to the front line to protect a more tender, more vulnerable part of ourselves. It is often easier and feels safer to experience the hot, empowering rush of anger than it is to feel the cold, vulnerable pang of being hurt, afraid, ashamed, disrespected, or powerless. Anger creates an illusion of control and strength in situations where we feel we have none. When a loved one makes a careless comment that wounds us, the raw feeling of hurt can be instantly covered by a flash of anger. When we witness an act of injustice in the world, the underlying feeling might be a deep fear or a sense of helplessness, but it manifests as outrage. When another driver cuts us off in traffic, the feeling of being disrespected and powerless erupts as road rage. The practice, then, is to cultivate enough inner stillness to be able to gently look behind the bodyguard. When the fire of anger flares up, instead of immediately identifying with it, we can bring our mindful curiosity to it and ask, "Hello, anger. I see you are here, working so hard. What are you protecting? What vulnerable feeling lies beneath this heat?" This inquiry is not an intellectual analysis, but a gentle, compassionate turning towards our own heart, seeking to understand the root of the fire, not just its flames. With this understanding, we can now apply our four-step practice to work directly with this powerful energy. The first step is to recognize it without judgment. Anger is present. The energy of anger is arising. This simple, non-judgmental labeling prevents us from immediately becoming the anger. The second, and perhaps most difficult step, is to allow it. We are often taught that anger is bad, so our instant reaction is to suppress it, to push it down. But suppressed anger doesn't disappear. It curdles within us, leading to resentment, passive aggression, or even physical illness. Allowing anger does not mean we have to act on it. It simply means we give the raw energy permission to exist in our awareness for a moment. We create a container of mindful presence where the energy can be felt without needing to explode. The third step is to investigate. As with anxiety, we first investigate the raw, physical sensations of anger. Where is it in your body? Is it a tightness in your jaw, a pounding in your chest, a searing heat in your face and neck, clenched fists? Just feel these pure sensations. Then, we can investigate the message. Listening deeply, we can ask, what is this anger trying to communicate? What important boundary has been crossed? What personal value has been violated? What injustice does this energy perceive? We are treating the anger like an urgent dispatch from a part of our being that feels threatened. This leads us to a crucial choice point. Anger is an immense source of energy. It is a powerful fuel. Left unchecked and unguided by wisdom, this fuel is wildly destructive. It powers harsh words that can never be taken back. It shatters relationships. It escalates conflicts, and it perpetuates cycles of violence on both personal and global scales. This is the result of letting the raw energy of anger blindly drive our actions. However, when this same potent energy is held in mindful awareness and guided by compassion, it can become a powerful force for constructive change. The energy that arises from seeing an injustice can be channeled into determined, non-violent activism. The anger that comes from having a boundary violated can provide the clarity and resolve to state that boundary firmly and kindly. The anger that comes from seeing someone vulnerable being mistreated can fuel the courage to protect them. The entire difference lies in the pause. Mindfulness creates a sacred pause between the arising of the angry impulse and our behavioral response. In that space, we have a choice. We can either let the energy explode destructively, or we can harness it like a powerful river being channeled through a turbine to generate light and positive action in the world. As we learn to work with this fire, it is essential that we bring compassion to ourselves. Feeling angry can be an intensely painful and agitating experience. It is a state of dukkha. It burns, it isolates, and it often leaves a residue of guilt and shame. Instead of judging ourselves for feeling a natural human emotion, we can offer ourselves the gift of kindness. We can place a hand on our heart and acknowledge, this is really difficult. To feel this much heat is painful. This self-compassion cools the secondary fire of self-judgment and allows us to hold the primary energy of anger with more grace. A timeless story from the life of the Buddha offers a profound teaching on how to relate to anger, especially when it is directed at us. One day, a man came to the Buddha and began to insult him with a torrent of angry and abusive words. The Buddha listened patiently and silently until the man had exhausted himself. Then he asked him a simple question. My friend, if someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, to whom does that gift belong? The man, surprised, replied, well, it would belong to the person who offered it. The Buddha smiled gently and said, exactly so. You have offered me the gift of your anger and your insults. I do not accept them. This teaching is a powerful reminder that we do not have to internalize the anger of others. We can let it remain their property, but it also offers insight into our own anger. when a storm of anger arises within us, it is like a gift from our conditioned mind, from our past hurts and fears. We do not have to accept this gift as our true identity. We can acknowledge its presence without becoming its owner. We can see the dark cloud without believing we are the storm. By reframing anger as a protective messenger, by learning to listen to its underlying message of hurt or fear, and by choosing wisely how to use its powerful energy, we transform it from a destructive master into a valuable servant. We learn that its thunder is not just a threat, but a call to attention, a signal that a boundary needs to be protected, an injustice needs to be addressed, or a wound needs to be healed. The intense, fiery energy of anger so often erupts when our deep-seated desires are blocked or our expectations of the world are not met. This points us directly toward another pervasive and often confusing weather system of the mind, the subtle but persistent fog of constant wanting. What is the true nature of this endless thirst that so often leaves us feeling frustrated and unfulfilled? From the fiery, crackling energy of anger, we now turn our attention to a weather system that is quieter, cooler, and often heavier. This is the cloud of sadness, a gentle, persistent rain that can settle over the landscape of the mind, muting the colors of the world and slowing the pace of life. It can arrive as a soft mist of melancholy or as a downpour of profound grief. In our modern culture, which so often fetishizes relentless positivity and cheerful productivity, sadness is frequently treated as a problem to be solved, a malfunction to be quickly fixed. We are told to cheer up, to look on the bright side, to distract ourselves, to medicate ourselves away from this fundamental human emotion. This constant pressure to outrun our own sorrow is a subtle form of violence. It teaches us to be ashamed of our own hearts, to suppress our authentic feelings, and to feel alienated and alone in our pain. Today, we will do the opposite. We will extend a gentle invitation to our sadness. We will learn to stop running from the rain and instead create a safe and sacred space to simply allow it to fall. This societal aversion to sadness forces us into a state of denial, which is a major source of our suffering. When we feel the first pangs of sorrow, our conditioned response is often to push it away. We put on a brave face for the world. We tell everyone, including ourselves, that I'm fine, and we try to carry on as if nothing has happened. We bury the grief under layers of busyness, distraction, or forced optimism, but suppressed sadness does not vanish. It remains within us as a latent tension, a chronic ache in the heart, a sense of numbness that disconnects us from life's richness. True emotional well-being is not the endless pursuit of happiness or the absence of difficult feelings. It is the capacity to be present with and responsive to the full spectrum of our human experience. To deny ourselves the right to feel sad is to deny a part of our own humanity. It is to refuse to acknowledge the truth of our own experience, and this creates a deep and painful rift within our own soul. To begin healing this rift, we must reframe our entire understanding of what sadness is. We are often taught to see sadness as the opposite of love or happiness. But the truth is, in an impermanent world, sadness is very often the natural, unavoidable testament to love. The pain of loss is the price we pay for the joy of connection. We feel grief precisely because we first felt love. The depth of our sorrow is a direct measure of the depth of our love. When we lose a beloved person or animal, when a cherished dream dissolves, when a precious time in our life comes to an end, the sadness that follows is not a malfunction. It is an honoring, It is the heart's sacred and painful way of acknowledging the value of what was lost. To numb our sadness, to rush through our grief, is in a way to dishonor the very thing we cherished. By allowing ourselves the space and time to feel our sorrow fully, we are paying tribute to the love that was. We are acknowledging the importance of the connection that has now changed form. It is a slow, tender, and deeply necessary process of the heart. So, how do we practice this? How do we sit with this tender and vulnerable emotion? We can use our 4-step method as a gentle guide. First, we recognize. When you feel the familiar heaviness begin to descend, you can just gently note it. Sadness is here. There is no need for a big story or analysis. Just a simple, quiet acknowledgement. The second step is to allow. This is perhaps the most important step with sadness. It is an act of profound self-compassion. You give yourself explicit permission to feel this way. You can say to yourself, "It is okay to be sad. There is nothing wrong with this feeling. Let the rain fall." You create a safe inner sanctuary for your own vulnerability, a space free from the pressure to be strong or get over it. The third step is to investigate. Gently bring your attention to the physical sensations of sadness in your body. Where does it reside? Is it a heavy weight on your chest, an ache, or a lump in your throat, a feeling of emptiness in your stomach, watery eyes? Just rest your awareness with these physical sensations. And if tears begin to well up, allow them to come. See tears not as a sign of weakness, but as a natural and beautiful process of release. Tears are the body's way of letting the rain wash through us. They are a physical manifestation of letting go. The fourth step is non-identification, which is deeply intertwined with nurturing self-compassion. As you sit with the physical sensations, you can remind yourself, this feeling is here, but it is not the entirety of who I am. I am the loving awareness that is holding this sadness. You can then offer yourself a gesture of care. Place a hand gently over your heart. Feel its warmth. Offer yourself kind words, the way you would to a beloved friend who was grieving. This is so hard. I am here with you in this pain. Let me just be with you. In doing so, you are becoming your own compassionate companion. You are mothering your own sorrow, holding it with an unconditional tenderness that allows it to be what it is, a painful but natural wave passing through the ocean of your being. When we give sadness the space to move through us in this way, we often discover that, like a cleansing rain, it has a healing quality. After a good cry, the air often seems fresher, the world clearer. The tension of holding back is released, leaving us feeling softer, more open, and more tenderly connected to our own humanity and to the world around us. The great power of embracing our sadness is that it connects us to our shared humanity. This is beautifully illustrated in the ancient story of a woman named Kisa Gautami. Her only child had died, and she was inconsolable, lost in a storm of absolute grief. Denying the reality of his death, she carried his small body through her village, begging everyone she met for a medicine that could bring him back to life. While many pitied her, no one could help. Finally, someone suggested she go see the Buddha. She rushed to him and pleaded, "Can you give me the medicine to cure my son?" The Buddha looked at her with immense compassion and said, "I can help you, but first, you must do one thing. Go back into the village and bring me a single mustard seed from a house where no one, a parent, a child, a spouse, or a savanthus ever died." Hopeful, Kisa Gautami went from door to door. At the first house, the family readily offered her a mustard seed. But when she asked if anyone in their home had ever died, they replied with sorrow, "Alas, we lost our beloved father just last year." At the next house, they said, We can give you many seeds. But we recently lost our youngest child. She went to every house in the village, and the story was the same. Everyone was willing to help, but every single family had been touched by the pain of loss. As dusk fell, the truth began to dawn on Kisa Gotami. She realized that her own profound and personal grief was not a unique curse. Death and loss were not an affliction that had singled her out. They were a universal, inescapable part of the human condition. This realization did not erase her pain, but it fundamentally transformed it. She was no longer alone in her sorrow. Her personal grief had become a doorway to a deep and compassionate connection with all other beings. The Buddha did not give her a magical cure. He gave her a path to hold her sorrow in the vast, compassionate embrace of shared human experience. By learning to honor our sadness as a testament to love, by giving ourselves permission to feel it fully, and by understanding that it connects us to the heart of humanity, we transform it from a source of isolated suffering into a path of healing and connection. This journey through the clouds of anxiety, anger, and sadness has revealed a common theme. So much of our struggle is tied to a fragile and vulnerable sense of me, a me who feels threatened by the future, wronged by the past, or diminished by loss. But who is this I that stands at the center of all this drama? To find a deeper and more unshakable freedom, we must now turn the light of our awareness onto the storyteller itself. We must investigate the very nature of the self. This leads us to one of the most profound and liberating teachings of all, the insight of anatta, or no, self. Our journey inward has taken us through the turbulent weather of the mind, the anxious fogs of the future, the fiery thunderstorms of anger, and the heavy, sorrowful rains of loss. As we have explored these states, we have noticed a common thread, a central figure standing in the middle of every storm, a sense of I am anxious, I have been wronged, my heart is broken. We experience life as if there is a solid, continuous, and independent entity at our career chief executive, a central command, a permanent self who is the feeler of all feelings and the thinker of all thoughts. The entire drama of our suffering seems to revolve around protecting, defending, and gratifying this precious sense of me. We now arrive at what is perhaps the most profound, counterintuitive, and ultimately liberating teaching offered by the Buddhist path. It is an invitation to turn the light of our awareness, not on the clouds, but on the one who claims to be witnessing them. It is an invitation to ask the question, who is actually feeling this? This inquiry leads us to the radical insight of anatta, or no self. This teaching does not claim that you do not exist. It does not lead to nihilism or a cold void. Instead, it reveals that the solid, separate self we have always believed in is, upon close inspection, an illusion. And seeing through this illusion is the key to an unshakable and boundless freedom. To understand this, we must become investigators of our own experience. The teachings guide us to deconstruct what we call our self into its component parts. This is traditionally done by looking at 5 categories of experience, known as the 5 aggregates, or skandhas. The first is form, which is our physical body. We often deeply identify with our bodies, but is this body a permanent, unchanging thing? Of course not. It is a dynamic process of change. Cells are constantly dying and being replaced. It ages, it gets sick, it heals, it feels pleasure, it feels pain. It is a river of biological processes, not a solid statue. If it is always changing, it cannot be a permanent, unchanging self. The second aggregate is feeling. This refers not to complex emotions, but to the raw, immediate sensation of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral that arises whenever our senses make contact with the world. A soft blanket feels pleasant. A sharp noise feels unpleasant. The sight of a plain wall may feel neutral. These feelings are flickering on and off, moment by moment. They are completely dependent on external stimuli and our internal state. Are you this fleeting sensation of pleasure? Are you this momentary pang of pain? Clearly not. They are just weather passing through. The third aggregate is perception. This is the faculty of our mind that recognizes, identifies, and labels our experience. It is the part that says blue, tree, dog, threat, or opportunity. Our perceptions are heavily conditioned by our past experiences, our culture, our language, and our current mood. Two people can look at the exact same event and perceive it in completely different ways. Perception is not an objective window onto reality. It is a conditioned labeling process. Is this fallible, labeling mind the real, solid you? The fourth aggregate is mental formations. This is a broad category that includes all of our other mental habits, our thoughts, opinions, beliefs, intentions, desires, aversions, and memories. This is the constant chatter of the mind, the inner narrator telling stories. But are these thoughts and opinions the real you? Your opinions have changed countless times over your life. Thoughts arise and cease in an endless, uncontrollable stream. To identify with our thoughts is to build a house on the surface of a churning ocean. These mental formations are the most active and turbulent of all the clouds. The fifth and final aggregate is consciousness. This refers to the raw faculty of awareness that arises when a sense organ connects with a sense object. For example, when the eye meets a shape and a color, eye consciousness arises. When the ear meets a sound, ear consciousness arises. The teachings point out that consciousness is not a single, monolithic entity or a soul that resides within us. It is a flickering, dependent process, arising and ceasing moment by moment, completely reliant on the other four aggregates to function. It has no independent existence. So, when we look for a solid, permanent, independent self, where is it? Is it in the body, in feelings, perceptions, thoughts, or consciousness? We find that it is in none of these things. What we call the self is a convenient name, a conceptual label we apply to the dynamic, interdependent, and constantly changing flow of these five processes. The ego, on the other hand, is the story our mind tells about this process. The ego is the narrator that takes these impersonal events and weaves them into a personal drama, starring me. It is the ego that feels personally insulted when an unpleasant feeling arises. It is the ego that feels its existence is threatened when the body gets sick, leading to anxiety. It is the ego that feels diminished when it loses something it was attached to, leading to sadness. By seeing the five aggregates as impersonal, flowing processes, we begin to see the ego's drama for what it is, a work of fiction, a compelling, but ultimately untrue story. A classic Buddhist text, The Questions of King Milinda, illustrates this with a beautiful and enduring metaphor. The enlightened sage Nagasena has a dialogue with the Greek king Milinda. When the king asks Nagasena his name, the sage replies that Nagasena is merely a designation, a name for a collection of parts, and that no permanent person can be found. The king, a sharp logician, is skeptical and challenges him using the king's own chariot as an example. Nagasena then begins to deconstruct the chariot. He asks the king, "Is the pole of the chariot the chariot?" "No," replies the king. "Are the wheels the chariot? Is the axle? Are the reins?" To each question, the king answers, "Number." Nagasena then asks, "Is it the combination of all these parts that is the chariot?" The king is forced to admit that it is not. Finally, Nagasena concludes, "Your Majesty, chariot is just a convenient name, a designation we use when all these parts are assembled in a particular way. But there is no essential chariot soul that exists separately from its parts." He then applies the lesson directly to himself. Nagasena is just like chariot. It is a convenient name for the dynamic interplay of form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. If you look for a permanent, independent soul or self within these components, you will not find one. We are a process, not a thing. We are a verb, not a noun. This insight into anatta, or no self, is not an intellectual game. It is the key to profound liberation. When we begin to see through the illusion of the solid, separate self, the entire architecture of our suffering begins to crumble. If there is no fixed, permanent self to defend, then who is there to be insulted? If there is no solid ego to enhance and protect, whose status is threatened? If there is no core me that can be diminished by loss, what is there to fear? The whole project of the ego, its constant striving, its desperate defenses, its anxious self-preservationes, seen as unnecessary and based on a false premise. The clinging fist of Tanha naturally begins to relax because it has nothing solid to cling to and nothing solid to protect. We become less like a brittle statue, easily chipped and broken by the world, and more like a flowing river, able to adapt, to move around obstacles, and to merge with the great ocean of life. The deconstruction of the separate self does not lead to a cold, empty nihilism. In fact, it leads to the very opposite. By dissolving the artificial barrier that we believe separates me from you and the world, it opens the door to a profound and authentic connection with all of life. When we see that we are not a separate noun, but an interdependent verb, we recognize that our well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of everyone and everything else. We are all waves in the same ocean. This deep insight into our shared existence is the fertile ground from which the most beautiful qualities of the heart can finally grow without obstruction. It is what allows us to move beyond simply observing our own clouds and to begin actively cultivating a sky filled with warmth, light, and care for all beings. This naturally leads us to the practice of generating boundless compassion and unconditional loving kindness. Having journeyed into the profound insight of anatta, seeing that the solid, separate self is an illusion, the walls of our inner fortress begin to dissolve. The rigid distinction between my suffering and your suffering becomes porous and transparent. We begin to see that all beings are adrift in the same ocean, subject to the same currents of birth, aging, sickness, and death, the same waves of joy and sorrow. This deep recognition of our shared condition, our radical interconnectedness, is the fertile soil from which one of the most beautiful flowers of the human heart can grow. This quality is called karuna, a Pali word that translates as compassion. Compassion is more than just a fleeting feeling of pity or sympathy. It is the active, trembling resonance of the heart in the face of suffering, coupled with the sincere and powerful wish for that suffering to end. It is the heart's most courageous and tender response to the universal reality of dukkha. To understand karuna, we must see that it has two essential wings, like a bird. The first wing is wisdom, the clear seeing of suffering as it is. It is the willingness to look at pain, in ourselves and in others, without turning away. It is the courage to acknowledge the first arrow. The second wing is love, the heartfelt aspiration for that pain to be healed. True compassion is not sentimental. It is not about getting lost in another's pain or drowning in a sea of emotion. It is a clear-eyed, strong-backed, and soft-fronted way of being in the world. It is the strength to be present with suffering without being broken by it. Pity often looks down from a position of superiority. Sympathy feels sorry for someone from a distance. Compassion dares to feel with someone, to step into the shared space of our common humanity, and to recognize their pain as a reflection of our own potential for pain. It is the ultimate expression of seeing ourselves in others. For most of us, especially those raised in cultures that prize strength and self-reliance, the most challenging place to begin practicing compassion is with ourselves. We are often our own most relentless critics, holding ourselves to impossible standards and speaking to ourselves with a harshness we would never dream of using with a friend. We berate ourselves for our mistakes. We judge ourselves for our difficult emotions, and we feel ashamed of our vulnerabilities. The practice of self-compassion is a radical act of reversing this lifelong habit of inner warfare. It is the conscious choice to treat ourselves with the same kindness, care, and understanding that we would offer to a dear friend who was struggling. And Dr. Kristin Neff, a pioneering researcher in this field, outlines 3 key components to this practice. The first is mindfulness. We must first acknowledge our pain without either suppressing it or exaggerating it. We simply allow ourselves to see, this is a moment of suffering. The second is a sense of common humanity. We remind ourselves that our struggles, flaws, and failures are not a sign that we are uniquely broken, but rather a part of the shared, imperfect human experience. To suffer is not a personal failing. Everyone suffers. This realization is the direct antidote to the shame and isolation that so often accompany our pain. The third and most active component is self-kindness. This means actively comforting and soothing ourselves when we are in pain. Instead of the lash of self-criticism, we offer ourselves the balm of gentle words. When you make a mistake, instead of the inner voice that says, "You're so stupid," you can learn to say, "That was a difficult situation, and you did the best you could." It's okay to be imperfect. When you are overwhelmed by a painful emotion, instead of berating yourself for being weak, you can say, "This is so hard right now. May I be gentle with myself in this moment." A simple yet profound way to practice this is to place a hand gently over your heart. The warmth and gentle pressure are a physical gesture of care that can be surprisingly powerful. It is a way of signaling to our own nervous system that we are safe, that we are being cared for. This is the essence of nurturing ourselves, of becoming our own best friend and ally, rather than our own worst enemy. This practice of self-compassion is not a selfish indulgence. In fact, it is the essential foundation for developing genuine and sustainable compassion for others. It is often said that you cannot pour from an empty cup. When we are constantly depleting ourselves with harsh self-judgment, we have very little emotional resource left to offer anyone else. But when we learn to fill our own cup with the warmth of self-kindness, it naturally begins to overflow. The more we learn to be compassionate with our own dark clouds, our own anxiety, anger, and sadness, the less frightened and judgmental we become when we see those same clouds in other people. When we can accept our own imperfections, we can more easily accept the imperfections of those around us. When we see someone acting out in anger, Instead of reacting with our own defensiveness, our compassionate mind can see the suffering behind their behavior. We can recognize that their aggression is likely a second arrow, a misguided attempt to protect a vulnerable, hurting part of themselves. This understanding doesn't necessarily excuse harmful behavior, but it prevents us from perpetuating the cycle of reactivity and hatred. It allows us to respond to difficult situations with clarity and wisdom, rather than blind reaction. Judgment builds walls. Compassion builds bridges. It is a mistake to view compassion as a weak, passive, or overly sentimental quality. True compassion, or karuna, is a source of immense strength and courage. It is the courage to move towards suffering, not away from it. It is the resilience that allows us to keep our hearts open in the face of pain. It is the strength that motivates us to take action to alleviate the suffering we see in the world. This is powerfully illustrated in a story from the Buddha's life. He once came upon a community of monks and discovered that one of them was gravely ill with a contagious and foul-smelling disease. The other monks, out of aversion and fear, had been neglecting him completely, leaving him to lie in his own filth. The Buddha, upon seeing this, went directly to the sick monk. With the help of his chief attendant, Ananda, he began to gently wash the monk's diseased body with his own hands. He cleaned his soiled robes and made him comfortable. Afterwards, he gathered the other monks together and spoke to them directly. He taught them that they were a spiritual family and that to neglect one of their own was to neglect the very heart of the path. And then he delivered this unforgettable teaching: whoever nurses the sick and suffering nurses me. Whoever wishes to serve me should serve the sick. This story shows that compassion is not a lofty ideal or a pleasant feeling. It is a hands-on, embodied practice. It is the strength to overcome our own fear and disgust in order to connect with and care for another being in their moment of greatest need. It is the ultimate expression of our interconnectedness, made real through courageous, loving action. Karuna, born from the wisdom of our shared existence and nurtured by the daily practice of self-compassion, is the heart's most powerful and healing response to the truth of suffering. It is the force that mends the world, one small act of kindness at a time, starting with ourselves. It is the trembling of the heart that says, "May you be free from your pain." But the boundless capacity of the human heart does not stop there. We can take another courageous step. We can move from the sincere wish to alleviate the suffering of all beings to the active and joyful wish for all beings to find happiness, peace, and well-being. This is the radiant practice of boundless loving-kindness, or metta. If compassion, or karuna, is the heart's tender response to the reality of pain, then its radiant twin is metta, or loving-kindness. While karuna is the sincere wish for all beings to be free from suffering, metta is the proactive, boundless, and joyful wish for all beings to be happy and well. It is the sun that comes out after the compassionate rains have cleared the air. It is not a passive feeling that we must wait to arise, nor is it the same as the conditional, preferential love we often feel for our family and friends. Metta is a universal, unconditional goodwill. It is a friendship with the world. Most importantly, it is a bhavana, a quality of heart and mind that can be intentionally cultivated and developed through practice. We do not have to wait to feel loving. We can practice the intention of love, and in doing so, we become a source of love in the world. This practice is a profound act of generosity, a gift of the heart that we can offer freely to ourselves and to all of life. The traditional method for cultivating metta is a systematic, guided meditation that gradually expands the circle of our goodwill. It is a practice that gently stretches the capacity of our heart, starting from the easiest object and moving towards the most challenging. The foundation of the entire practice, the place from which all genuine love must flow, is oneself. For many of us, this is the most difficult step. We find it easier to wish others well than to offer that same kindness to ourselves. But we cannot give what we do not possess. To try to love others without first loving ourselves is like trying to pour from an empty vessel. So, we begin here, in the quiet sanctuary of our own being. Finding a comfortable posture, we can bring to mind a gentle, friendly feeling towards ourselves. We then silently repeat a series of traditional phrases, letting the intention behind them sink into our heart. May I be safe. May I be healthy and strong. May I be happy and contented. May I live with ease. We are not demanding these things, but gently wishing them, planting seeds of kindness in the soil of our own heart. We offer ourselves the same gentle care we would offer to a beloved child. Once we have established a baseline of warmth and kindness for ourselves, we move to the second stage. We bring to mind a benefactor or a dearly loved one. This should be someone for whom our love flows easily and unconditional, as a dear friend, a respected teacher, a family member, or even a beloved pet. We visualize this person clearly in our mind's eye, and we direct all the goodwill we have generated towards them. We use the same phrases, adapted for them. May you be safe. May you be healthy and strong. May you be happy and contented. May you live with ease. We hold their image in our heart and bathe it in the light of our loving kindness. Because our affection for this person is already strong, this stage helps the feeling of metta to blossom and flow naturally, building its momentum. In the third stage, we begin to stretch the muscle of our heart. We bring to mind a neutral person. This is someone we see in our daily lives but have no strong feelings about one way or the other. The cashier at the grocery store, the person who delivers our mail, someone we see on our daily commute. We often move through the world surrounded by such people, seeing them not as fully fledged human beings with their own hopes and fears, but as mere background characters in our own personal movie. This stage is designed to break down that wall of indifference. We bring this neutral person to mind, and we recognize that just like us, they too wish to be happy and free from suffering. And so, we extend the exact same heartfelt wishes to them. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you live with ease. In this simple act, we are transforming a stranger into a fellow human being in our heart. We are recognizing our shared aspiration for well-being. The fourth stage is the most challenging, and in many ways, the most transformative. Here, we are invited to bring to mind a difficult person, someone with whom we have conflict, someone who has hurt us, or someone we simply dislike. This is an advanced practice and should be approached with great care. If the feeling is too raw, it is perfectly fine to stay with the earlier stages. The point here is not to force ourselves to like this person, nor is it to condone any harmful actions they may have committed. The practice is for our own benefit. It is an act of liberating ourselves from the prison of our own anger, resentment, and hatred. We recognize that this person's harmful actions are very likely driven by their own deep suffering, their own confusion, their own anger and fear. From a place of strength and stability, we try to extend a sliver of goodwill, recognizing that their happiness would likely make them a less harmful person. We can wish, may you too find true peace. May your heart be free from hatred. May you be happy. This act of profound spiritual maturity is not for them, it is for us. It is the act of cleaning the venom out of our own heart. Finally, in the fifth stage, we let our loving kindness become boundless. We expand our awareness beyond specific individuals and radiate our goodwill outwards in all directions. We extend it to all the people in our building, in our city, in our country. We extend it to all people on our continent, and then to the entire world. We include all beings without exception, large and small, near and far, seen and unseen. We send it to the animals, the insects, the plants, to all living things. We hold the entire planet in our heart and bathe it in the light of our well-wishing, repeating the universal phrases, "May all beings everywhere be safe. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be happy. May all beings live with ease." This practice dissolves the final barriers of the heart, connecting us to the vast web of life and cultivating a spirit of universal friendship. This practice of metta systematically softens the heart. It is the direct antidote to the states of mind that cause us so much pain, anger, ill will, jealousy, resentment, and fear. It melts the ice of isolation that our ego so carefully constructs and allows us to feel a part of the world again. There is a beautiful metaphor for this practice. Metta is like the flame of a candle. You can take your single flame and use it to light one other candle, then 10, then 100, then 1,000. Your own flame is not diminished in the slightest by sharing it. In fact, by sharing your light, the entire room becomes brighter for everyone. Loving kindness is a renewable resource that grows stronger the more we give it away. The protective and transformative power of metta is illustrated in a classic story of a monk who went to meditate in a remote and dangerous forest, known to be the lair of a band of violent robbers. His fellow monks warned him not to go, but he was determined. As he sat in deep meditation, the robbers returned and were enraged to find him in their territory. They approached him with the intent to kill him, but the monk, instead of feeling fear or generating anger, remained perfectly still and radiated powerful, unconditional waves of metta towards them. He saw not just the violent men, but the suffering and ignorance that drove them. He wished sincerely for them to be free from their own hatred and to find peace. The robbers, advancing on him with their weapons raised, suddenly found their anger dissolving. They were disarmed, not by a physical force, but by the sheer, unexpected power of this monk's unconditional goodwill. Their hearts softened, their aggression melted away, and they dropped their weapons, bowing reverently before him. They were transformed by an energy they had never encountered before, love without any agenda. The practice of metta, of actively cultivating a generous and friendly heart, is one of the most beautiful gifts we can give to ourselves and to the world. It is a declaration that even in the face of life's difficulties, we choose to orient our hearts toward kindness. When our heart becomes firmly established in both Karunathi, compassionate wish for all beings to be free from their suffering, and metta, loving wish for them to find true happiness, it arrives at a place of profound balance, resilience, and unshakable peace. It becomes like a great mountain, unmoved by the blowing winds of praise and blame, gain and loss, joy and sorrow. This supreme stability, this sublime balance of the heart, is the quality of upekkha, or equanimity. Having cultivated the heart's response to suffering through compassion, or karuna, and having expanded the heart's capacity for goodwill through loving kindness, or metta, we arrive at the culmination of these sublime practices, when the boundless heart, full of love and compassion, is balanced by the deep wisdom gained through our practice. A fourth and final quality emerges. This quality, known as upekkha in Pali, is equanimity. It is the crown jewel of the four immeasurables, the state of perfect balance, non-reactivity, and profound peace. It is the serene, unshakable stability of a mind that has found its true center. But like the other great teachings, equanimity is often profoundly misunderstood. It is crucial to understand that equanimity is not a state of cold indifference, apathy, or emotional numbness. It is not about ceasing to care. In fact, it is the deepest and wisest form of care. Indifference is a state of shutting down. It is born of fear, weariness, or aversion. When the pain of the world feels like too much to bear, the mind can choose to close the heart, to build a wall of uncaring as a form of self-protection. Indifference says, "I don't care," in order to avoid feeling pain. It is a gray, lifeless state, a retreat from the fullness of life. Equanimity is the exact opposite. It is born of immense courage, profound love, and penetrating wisdom. The heart of equanimity is wide open, not closed. It is able to feel the joys and sorrows of the world completely, but the mind remains so spacious and stable that it is not thrown off balance by them. Equanimity says, "I care so deeply about all of it, and because I care so deeply, I will not be hijacked by my own reactivity. I will remain balanced so that I can respond with wisdom and compassion rather than with blind reaction." Indifference is the numbness of a stone at the bottom of the sea, oblivious to the storm on the surface. Equanimity is the skill of a master surfer, fully alive and engaged with the power of a colossal wave, yet maintaining perfect balance and grace upon its crest. The practical ground where we train this quality of equanimity is in our daily lives, as we face what the teachings call the 8 worldly winds. These are the inevitable, constantly shifting pairs of opposites that blow through every human life, threatening to throw us off balance. The first pair is gain and loss. Our lives are a constant flux of gaining things, possessions, money, status, relationships, and losing them. The ordinary mind is thrown into elation and excitement by gain, and into despair and grief by loss. The equanimous mind experiences both gain and loss, but because it understands the truth of impermanence, it does not cling tightly to gain or fall apart in loss. It maintains its center, knowing that all conditions are temporary. The second pair is praise and blame. We are deeply conditioned to seek the approval of others and to fear their criticism. A word of praise can inflate our ego and make us feel wonderful, while a word of blame can wound us deeply and send us into a spiral of defensiveness or shame. The equanimous mind can hear both praise and blame without being taken over. It can appreciate kind words without becoming arrogant, and it can hear criticism without being crushed. It knows that its true worth is not dependent on the ever-changing opinions of others. The third pair is fame and disrepute. This relates to our public reputation, our status in the eyes of the world. The ordinary mind craves fame, recognition, and a good reputation, and it lives in fear of disgrace, shame, and being forgotten. This creates a constant, low-grade anxiety of managing our public image. The mind grounded in equanimity is not attached to its reputation. It is more concerned with the integrity of its own actions than with how those actions are perceived by others. It finds freedom from the exhausting performance of seeking public approval. The fourth and final pair is pleasure and pain. This is the most fundamental pair, relating to our raw, moment-to-moment experience. As we have seen, our lives are driven by the thirst of tanhath, relentless chasing of pleasant feelings, and the desperate running from painful ones. Through the practice of mindfulness, the equanimous mind has learned to be with both pleasant and unpleasant sensations without clinging and without aversion. It has learned to allow all experiences to arise and pass away without getting caught in the drama. These 8 worldly winds are blowing constantly. Without the stability of equanimity, we are like a leaf in the wind, helplessly spun around by every changing gust. With equanimity, we become the mountain. This brings us back to our central metaphors. Upekkha, or equanimity, is the ultimate embodiment of the sky. The sky holds all weather with perfect impartiality. It holds the brilliant, life-giving Suna metaphor for pleasure, praise, gain, and fame. And it holds the darkest, most violent thunderstorms a metaphor for pain, blame, loss, and disrepute. The sky does not cling to the sunshine, trying to make it last forever, nor does it hate the thunderstorm, trying to push it away. It allows all weather to manifest, to exist, and to pass through its vast, open, and unchanging space. The sky is not harmed by the storm, nor is it improved by the sunshine. It simply is. This is the nature of the equanimous mind. It is a radical acceptance of the totality of life, the light and the dark, the joy and the sorrow. To complement this image of spaciousness, we can use the image of the great mountain. A mighty mountain sits in profound, unshakable stability. The fierce winds of the east may blow against it, but the mountain is not moved. The hot winds of the south, the cold winds of the north, the gentle winds of the west, none of them can disturb the mountain's deep-rooted peace. It remains steadfast, a silent testament to endurance and stability. Our mind, when grounded in the practice of upekkha, develops this mountain-like quality. It is both spacious like the sky and solid like the mountain, able to hold everything while being moved by nothing. This state of upekkha is the highest form of inner freedom. It is freedom from the tyranny of circumstances. When our inner well-being is no longer contingent upon whether life is giving us what we want, we are truly and profoundly free. This doesn't mean we become passionless robots or no longer have preferences. We may still prefer health to sickness, gain to loss, praise to blame, but we are no longer a slave to these preferences. Our happiness is no longer held hostage by the unpredictable and uncontrollable events of the outer world. This unshakable peace does not come from nowhere. It arises as the natural fruit of deep wisdom. It is because we have seen for ourselves the truth of impermanence, anicca, that we no longer cling so tightly to changing conditions. It is because we have understood the nature of suffering, dukkha, and our own tendency to create it through resistance, that we learn to let go. And it is because we have glimpsed the truth of no self, anatta, that we stop taking everything so personally. This deep seeing is the unshakable foundation of equanimity. With these powerful inner tools now cultivated mindfulness to see clearly, compassion and loving kindness to open our hearts, and equanimity to remain balanced and free, we have developed a profound inner resilience. We have learned to tend to the garden of our own mind and heart. Now, with this inner strength as our foundation, we are prepared to turn our attention to one of the most powerful and bewildering forces in our external, modern world. How do we, as beings seeking inner peace and freedom, relate to the relentless pressures and endless promises of materialism? Having fortified our hearts with compassion and our minds with the unshakable peace of equanimity, we now possess the inner resilience to examine one of the most powerful and pervasive forces shaping our outer world. We turn our gaze from the landscape of the mind to the landscape of modern society, a terrain dominated by the towering promises and glittering mirages of materialism. From the moment we wake to the moment we sleep, we are immersed in a culture that delivers a single, relentless message. Happiness, fulfillment, and peace are things that can be bought. Your contentment is just one purchase away. This sophisticated and all-encompassing system is, in essence, a giant, externalized machine designed to stimulate and exploit the very thirst, the tanha, that we have identified as the root of our suffering. It is a grand promise to quench a thirst that, by its very nature, can never be satisfied from the outside. Let us deconstruct this promise. The engine of consumer culture runs on a simple, two-stroke process. First, it must create a sense of lack, a feeling of dukkha. Advertisements are masterful at this. They subtly or overtly tell you that you are not attractive enough, not successful enough, not secure enough, not happy enough. They create a problem, a feeling of insufficiency in your present experience. Second, they immediately offer a solution, their product. This new car will make you feel powerful and free. This skincare product will make you feel beautiful and worthy. This smartphone will make you feel connected and important. This process is a direct appeal to our deepest cravings. It stimulates kama tanha, the thirst for sensory pleasure, by promising comfort, delicious tastes, and visual appeal. And it masterfully manipulates bhava tanha, the thirst for being, by promising that acquiring a certain brand or lifestyle will grant us a more desirable identity, a higher status, and the admiration of others. We are conditioned from birth to believe that the path to a better life is paved with better things. The great tragedy of this promise, however, is not that it is shallow, but that it is structurally flawed. It simply does not work. And the reason it does not work is due to a well-documented psychological phenomenon known as the hedonic treadmill. Imagine you are walking on a treadmill. You have a baseline level of happiness, a default emotional state. You believe that if you can just get that new thing, you desire a new home, a promotion, a new piece of technology, you will finally arrive at a lasting state of greater happiness. You work hard, you strive, and you finally acquire it. For a short time, there is a genuine spike of pleasure and excitement. Your happiness level rises. But then, something insidious happens. You adapt. The new home, which was once a thrilling novelty, simply becomes your house. The new phone, once a marvel of technology, becomes just your phone. The new becomes normal, and your happiness level, after its brief spike, returns almost exactly to its original baseline. You are back where you started. Now, to get another spike of pleasure, the old acquisition is no longer enough. You need something newer, bigger, better. You have to increase the speed of the treadmill just to feel like you are moving forward. This is the endless, exhausting cycle of materialism. It is a direct manifestation of viparinama dukkha, the suffering that comes from the impermanence of pleasant feelings. We are chasing a fleeting chemical reaction in the brain, mistaking it for genuine, lasting well-being. The wisdom of the Buddhist path offers a radical alternative. It suggests that we have been looking for happiness in the wrong place entirely. It teaches that true, enduring well-being, or sukha, is not something that can be added from the outside. It is an inner quality that is revealed when we begin to remove the inner causes of our suffering. Lasting peace is not found by accumulating more possessions, but by diminishing the power of our own craving. Contentment is not achieved by finally getting everything we want, but by realizing we already have enough. This is not a philosophy of grim self-denial. It is an invitation to discover a richer, deeper, and more reliable source of joy that is completely independent of our external circumstances. This is the cultivation of santuti, or contentment. Contentment is not apathetic resignation. It is the joyful, peaceful, and liberating recognition that our inner peace is not contingent on the next purchase. It is the practice of appreciating the miracle of what we already have, the breath in our lungs, the faculty of awareness, the connections with our loved ones, the simple beauty of the natural world. This leads to the practice of simplicity. This is not about forcing ourselves into a life of harsh poverty, but about a conscious and voluntary choice to clear away the clutter from our lives. We live in a world of overwhelming complexity and distraction. By consciously choosing to live with less stuff, less debt, less distraction, less busyness, we create more space. We create space in our homes, space in our schedules, and most importantly, space in our minds. In this space, we can begin to discover the simple joys that were previously drowned out by the noise of consumerism. The joy of a quiet morning, the joy of a deep conversation, the joy of reading a book without interruption, the joy of simply being present with our own experience. We trade the frantic, fleeting pleasure of the hedonic treadmill for the deep, abiding peace of a simpler, more intentional life. There is a cautionary tale of a man who was a master of the material world. He was brilliant, driven, and from a young age, he dedicated his entire life to the accumulation of wealth. He built a vast business empire, acquired multiple magnificent homes filled with priceless art, and commanded the respect and envy of all who knew him. He was always in a state of anxious motion, flying from one meeting to the next, always planning his next deal, always worried about his competitors. He told his family, and he told himself that one day, when he had achieved a certain level of wealth, he would finally relax, travel, and enjoy the fruits of his labor. But that day never came, because the goalpost of enough was always shifting. One day, he was struck by a sudden illness and found himself on his deathbed. As he lay there, surrounded by the opulent symbols of his success, a devastating clarity washed over him. He realized with a cold horror that he could not take a single coin with him. The paintings, the houses, the stock certificates, they were all utterly meaningless now. He saw that in his relentless, lifelong pursuit of acquiring things, he had completely missed the experience of actually living. He had never learned to be still. He had never found time for the simple joy of a sunset, for a deep connection with his children, for the quiet peace of his own heart. His entire life had been a frantic preparation for a future that had never arrived. And now, it was too late. He had gained the whole world, but in the process, he had lost himself entirely. This story reminds us that true wealth is not measured by the contents of our bank accounts, but by the quality of our consciousness. By seeing through the empty promise of materialism, by understanding the frustrating mechanics of the hedonic treadmill, and by courageously choosing to cultivate inner contentment over outer accumulation, we can step off this exhausting path. We liberate ourselves from the endless cycle of craving and disappointment. We begin to discover that the most precious things in life are not things at all. This radical shift from seeking fulfillment in the external world naturally turns our attention back inward. If lasting joy cannot be found in acquiring more things, then where is it to be found? The path of wisdom suggests that a profound and reliable form of happiness arises spontaneously when the mind is calm, clear, and concentrated. This leads us to explore the radiant inner qualities of piti and sukhati, joy and bliss, that are born not from getting, but from simply being. Having turned our gaze away from the exhausting, external pursuit of happiness promised by materialism, we are now invited to discover a source of joy that is infinitely more reliable, nourishing, and profound. The wisdom of the path suggests that true happiness is not something we acquire or achieve, but rather a natural quality of the mind that reveals itself when we create the right conditions, when we cease our frantic chasing and learn to be still, when we quiet the inner noise of craving and aversion. A remarkable thing happens. A deep and radiant joy begins to well up from within, a joy that is not dependent on any external thing. This is the discovery of our own inner wealth, the unearthing of a hidden spring within our own garden. In the language of the teachings, these states of meditative joy are known as piti and sukha. As we commit to a regular practice of mindfulness, patiently returning our attention to the breath again and again, the mind gradually begins to settle. The usual traffic of anxious thoughts, regrets, plans, and commentaries starts to thin out. In the quiet space that emerges, we can begin to experience the first signs of piti. Piti is often translated as joy, rapture, or exhilaration. It is a more energetic and vibrant quality of happiness. It can manifest in many ways. A feeling of lightness in the body, as if you could float, a series of goosebumps or pleasant shivers running up the spine, a sense of thrilling delight, or waves of pleasure washing through the body. It is the mind's joyful response to being unburdened. It is the exhilarating feeling of putting down a heavy bag you have been carrying for years without even realizing it. Piti is the initial splash of cool water from the inner spring, a signpost that we are on the right path, an encouragement from our own mind to continue. Following the more energetic joy of piti, a calmer and more sustained state of well-being can arise. This is sukha. Sukha is often translated as happiness, bliss, or contentment. If piti is the excitement of discovering an oasis in the desert, sukha is the deep, peaceful satisfaction of resting in its shade and drinking its cool, clear water. It is a less dramatic, but more profound state. It is a deep-seated feeling of contentment, a quiet hum of well-being that permeates our entire being. There is no agitation in sukha, no restlessness. It is a happiness that is deeply calming and stabilizing. It is important to understand that these states are not the ultimate goal of meditation. The goal is liberation through wisdom. However, piti and sukha are beautiful and wholesome fruits of the practice. They provide the mind with a far superior alternative to the fleeting pleasures of the world, making it much easier to let go of our unhealthy attachments. This points to a crucial distinction that can transform our entire orientation to life: the difference between sensory pleasure and the true happiness born of a quiet mind. Sensory pleasure, what we might call worldly happiness, is entirely dependent on our five senses making contact with a pleasant object. It is the pleasure of tasting delicious food, of hearing a beautiful piece of music, of seeing a stunning sunset, of receiving a massage. This kind of pleasure is entirely dependent on an external stimulus. Because of this, it is inherently fleeting and unreliable. The delicious taste is gone once we have swallowed. The music ends, the sun sets. This is the happiness that fuels the hedonic treadmill. It is often described as feverish, as it leaves us feeling a little agitated, wanting more once it is over. It is the happiness of getting, of acquiring, of consuming. The meditative happiness of piti and sukha is of a completely different order. It is a happiness born not of getting, but of letting go. It arises from the seclusion of the mind, from its usual patterns of craving and aversion. It is not dependent on any external object, sound, or taste. It is generated from within. For this reason, it is described as a cool, calming, and deeply nourishing form of well-being. It does not agitate the mind or leave us craving more. Instead, it leaves us feeling more whole, more centered, and more at peace. It is the happiness of freedom, not the happiness of attachment. Once we have tasted this inner-generated sukha, even in small amounts, the frantic search for sensory pleasure begins to lose its appeal. We have discovered a superior, more satisfying, and infinitely more reliable source of nourishment. Imagine a person who owns a magnificent plot of land. The land is fertile and beautiful, but this person is unaware that deep beneath the surface of their own garden lies a pure, cool, and inexhaustible natural spring. And so, every single day, they take a bucket and leave their own property. They walk for miles under the hot sun, searching for water in the outside world. They draw water from muddy ponds, from polluted streams, and from the wells of others. They are in a constant state of anxiety, worried about finding enough water, and the water they do find is often brackish and unsatisfying, never truly quenching their thirst. Their life is defined by this exhausting, external search. Then one day, a wise friend suggests, "Why do you search so far afield? Have you ever tried digging in your own garden?" At first, the person is skeptical, but they decide to try. The digging is hard work. They have to clear away the rocks of distraction and the hard-packed soil of old mental habits, but they persist. And one day, their shovel breaks through into cool, damp earth. With a final effort, they clear the opening, and a beautiful, clear spring begins to bubble up from the ground. They taste the water, and it is the purest, sweetest, most refreshing water they have ever known. And they realize, with overwhelming joy, that this inexhaustible source of nourishment was here, within them, all along. They no longer need to wander the world with an empty bucket. The practice of meditation is this act of digging in our own garden. Piti and sukha are the cool, clear waters of the inner spring we uncover. Our practice, then, is to learn to recognize and appreciate these moments of inner joy and contentment, not just in our formal meditation sessions, but in our daily lives as well. You don't have to experience a dramatic state of rapture. It may be much more subtle. It might be a simple moment of peace you feel while watching the rain fall. It could be a quiet sense of contentment that arises when you are walking in nature. It could be the feeling of ease that comes when you realize your mind has been free from worry for a few minutes. When you notice these moments, the practice is simply to acknowledge them. You can gently say to yourself, "Ah, this is a moment of peace. This is pleasant." By paying gentle attention to these wholesome states, we are like a good gardener, watering the seeds of joy and contentment in our own mind. We encourage them to grow stronger and to arise more frequently. This inner well-being becomes our foundation, our refuge. It is a source of strength and resilience that allows us to navigate the inevitable difficulties of life with far more grace and stability. This discovery of a profound inner well-being does not lead us to withdraw from the world in a state of blissful isolation. On the contrary, it liberates us to engage with the world more fully and compassionately. When we are no longer frantically and selfishly searching for our own happiness in external things, we are finally free to lift our heads and notice our profound and beautiful connection to everything and everyone else. This realization that our inner well-being is not, and cannot be, separate from the well-being of the world around us, leads us to the sublime and transformative insight of interbeing. Having discovered a wellspring of joy and contentment that arises not from the outer world of things but from the inner stillness of our own being, we are now free. We are free from the exhausting, self-centered hunt for happiness, and this newfound freedom allows us to lift our gaze and see the world and our place in it with entirely new eyes. The insight of anatta, or no self, showed us that the solid, separate, I, we thought we were, is an illusion. Now, we can explore the positive and beautiful implication of that truth. If we are not separate, then what are we? The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh coined a beautiful word to describe our true nature, into being. This is the understanding that to be is always to interbe. Nothing in the entire cosmos exists by itself. Everything is profoundly connected to and made of everything else. This is not a mystical belief, but a plain description of reality, and seeing it clearly can transform our lives. To understand interbeing, let us look deeply at something as simple as a single sheet of paper in our hands. If we ask, "What is this paper?" the immediate answer is wood pulp from a tree, but we cannot stop there. To have a tree, you must have the rain cloud that watered it, so the cloud is in the paper. You must have the sun that nourished the tree with its light, so the sun is in the paper. You must have the soil that provided minerals, so the earth itself is in the paper. Then, we can see the logger who cut down the tree. He is in the paper, and the logger's parents are in the paper. His breakfast of bread is in the paper, which means the wheat, the field, and the farmer who grew the wheat are also in the paper. The factory workers who made the logger's saw are in the paper, as are the miners who dug the iron ore to make the steel for the saw. The entire economy, the chain of commerce, is present in this single sheet of paper. If we were to return any one of these elements to its source, if we were to give the sunshine back to the sun, or the water back to the cloud, or the logger back to his parents, the sheet of paper could not exist. It is empty of a separate, independent self, but it is full of the entire universe. This is the reality of interbeing. This profound insight has immediate and powerful implications for how we see ourselves and our relationships with others. Just as the paper contains the cloud, we contain each other. We are not isolated islands of consciousness. Our thoughts, our moods, our feelings, and our behaviors are deeply conditioned by the people around us, by our families, our culture, and our society. The idea of a self-made person is an illusion. We are all community-made. When we truly understand this, it becomes the fertile ground for a deep and authentic compassion. When we are faced with a person who is acting out of anger, fear, or ignorance, instead of reacting with judgment and blame, we can learn to look deeply at them. As we looked at the sheet of paper, we can see the non-them elements that have contributed to their suffering. We can see the difficult childhood that planted seeds of fear. We can see the societal pressures that created their anxiety. We can see the past hurts that are fueling their present anger. We begin to see their difficult behavior not as the expression of an evil, separate self, but as the manifestation of a complex web of causes and conditions. This does not mean we condone harmful actions, or that we don't protect ourselves by setting firm boundaries, but it completely changes our inner orientation. It dissolves the hard, solidifying ice of blame and hatred, and replaces it with the flowing water of understanding and compassion. How can we maintain absolute hatred for someone when we see the suffering that drives them? How can we hold on to a grudge when we see that both we and they are part of the same interconnected process? This understanding allows for the possibility of forgiveness, not as a moral duty, but as a wise act of letting go. We release others from the prison of our judgment, and in doing so, we release ourselves. We see that their storm clouds are made of the same universal elements as our own, and the feeling of separation begins to fade. Interbeing is a reality that flows in all directions. Just as we are influenced by others, our own actions, words, and even our thoughts are constantly rippling outwards, affecting the entire web of life. Our own state of being is our primary contribution to the world. When we cultivate peace within ourselves, we are not engaged in a selfish act. Our peace becomes a gift to everyone we encounter. A calm presence can soothe an agitated room. A kind word can change the course of someone's day. A moment of deep, mindful listening can be a profound act of healing for another person. Conversely, our own anger, our own anxiety, our own distractedness also sends out ripples, contributing to the stress and suffering of the world. We are never acting in a vacuum. Every thought, word, and deed adds a thread to the great tapestry of existence, either a thread of discord and separation, or a thread of connection and beauty. There is a powerful and sublime metaphor from ancient Mahayana Buddhism that captures this truth. It is the image of Indra's net. Imagine a vast, cosmic net that stretches to infinity in all directions. At each intersection of the net's threads, there hangs a single, perfectly polished, multifaceted jewel. The miraculous nature of this net is that each individual jewel reflects on its surface every other jewel in the entire, infinite net. And if you look even more closely, you will see that each of those reflections, in turn, contains the reflection of all the other jewels, and so on, to infinity. Each jewel, in its own small way, contains the whole. This is a perfect metaphor for the universe of interbeing. Each of us, each living being, each particle of dust, is one of these jewels. Our existence is a reflection of all other existences, and the totality of existence is reflected in each of us. When one jewel is touched, all the jewels tremble. When one jewel is polished and shines more brightly, the light is reflected in every other jewel across the entire net. The suffering of one is the suffering of all. The healing of one is the healing of all. This profound insight dissolves the last vestiges of our imagined separation. It moves us beyond a personal, individualistic spirituality and into a deeply engaged, relational, and ecological way of being. We realize that our own liberation is not separate from the liberation of all beings. Our own peace is not separate from the peace of the world. We are called to live with a deeper sense of care, respect, and responsibility, understanding that our lives are interwoven with the lives of all beings. This understanding of our deep interconnectedness is not just a beautiful idea. It has immediate and practical implications for how we navigate our daily lives. If my words land in your heart, and your listening affects my mind, how then should we speak to one another? How should we learn to listen? This brings us from the heights of cosmic philosophy to the most intimate and practical application of this wisdom, the art of mindful communication. The profound insight of interbeing, the realization that we are all inextricably connected like jewels in a vast cosmic net, calls us from a state of isolated self-concern into a life of active and engaged relationship. The primary way we experience and shape these relationships, the very threads with which we weave the fabric of our connections, is through communication. So much of our daily suffering are misunderstandings. Our hurt feelings, our conflicts arises from unskilled and unmindful communication. We use words as weapons to attack, as shields to defend, or as noise to fill empty space. We listen not to understand, but to find flaws, to form our rebuttal, to wait for our turn to speak. The path of wisdom offers us a radically different approach. It teaches us to transform our communication from a source of conflict into a profound practice of healing and connection. This is the art of speaking from the sky of our awareness, an art built on two pillars: loving speech and deep listening. Loving speech, known as Ainge in the Zen tradition, is the practice of using our words with the conscious intention to create more understanding, harmony, and happiness in the world, and to reduce suffering. This is not about being artificially sweet or avoiding difficult topics. It is about speaking the truth with kindness and skill. This practice can be guided by 4 key principles. The first is to speak truthfully and to avoid falsehood. This is the foundation of trust. Without truth, genuine connection is impossible. However, truth alone is not enough. Truth spoken without compassion can be a brutal weapon. Therefore, the second principle is to speak with kindness. We learn to wrap our truth in the soft cloth of care. For example, instead of an accusatory statement like, "You are so lazy and inconsiderate," which immediately creates a defensive wall, we can use the language of our own feelings. "I feel hurt and unsupported when the work is left for me to do. It would mean a lot to me if we could share the responsibility." The first statement is an attack. The second is an invitation to connect and solve a problem together. The third principle of loving speech is to refrain from divisive language. This means consciously choosing not to engage in gossip, slander, backbiting, or any speech that sets one person or group against another. Before speaking, we can ask ourselves, will these words bring people closer together, or will they create more suspicion and discord? We commit to being a force for reconciliation, not for division. The fourth principle is to avoid harsh or abrasive speech. This relates not just to the words we choose, but to the tone and energy behind them. We can say something technically true, but if our voice is filled with the heat of anger, sarcasm, or contempt, the message will be one of aggression. Loving speech is about purifying our intention, so that even when we must say something difficult, it comes from a place of care, not from a desire to punish or wound. These principles invite us into a deep mindfulness of our speech, transforming it from a reactive habit into a conscious, creative art. The second pillar of mindful communication, and arguably the more important and rarer skill, is deep listening. This practice, known as lung nge sao, is the art of listening with only one purpose: to help the other person suffer less. This requires that we set aside our own agenda entirely. We let go of our need to be right, our desire to offer advice, our impulse to fix their problems, and our habit of relating everything they say back to our own experiences. Instead, we offer the rare and precious gift of our full, silent, and non-judgmental presence. We become a calm and open space in which the other person can feel safe enough to express what is in their heart. To be truly heard, without interruption or judgment, is a profound act of healing. It allows a person to hear themselves more clearly, to untangle their own confused feelings, and to touch the source of their own wisdom. Very often, people do not need our solutions. They need a compassionate witness for their pain. There is a story that illustrates the immense power of this practice. A man whose life was filled with rage and sorrow over a great injustice done to him came to see the Buddha. He was consumed by his story, his pain, and his desire for vengeance. He began to speak, and a torrent of angry, bitter words poured out of him. He recounted every detail of his suffering, his voice shaking with emotion. The Buddha did not interrupt. He did not offer platitudes like, "Everything happens for a reason," or "You should try to forgive." He simply sat, completely present, his gaze soft and filled with an unwavering compassion. He listened with his whole being, with his ears, his eyes, and his heart. He listened to the words, and he listened to the pain behind the words. As the man continued to speak into the vast, silent space of the Buddha's listening, something began to shift. The man's own anger began to sound hollow to his own ears. His story began to lose its frantic energy. The heat of his rage slowly subsided, cooled by the calm ocean of the Buddha's presence. After a very long time, the man fell silent. The storm had passed. He felt a sense of peace and clarity he had not felt in years. The Buddha had healed him, not by what he had said, but by the profound quality of his listening. This is the gift we can learn to offer to one another. To practice this form of communication, we must learn to speak and listen from the sky of our awareness, rather than from the turbulent clouds of our ego. When we enter into a conversation, especially a difficult one, our ego is often on high alert. It feels a need to defend its position, to win the argument, to protect its image. If we identify with this ego cloud, we will be easily triggered. Another person's words will feel like a personal attack, and we will react with defensiveness or aggression, perpetuating the cycle of conflict. The practice is to remain anchored in our true identity as the spacious sky. From this vantage point, we can watch our own reactive clouds, the flash of anger, the pang of hurt arise, and pass without being hijacked by them. We can listen to the other person's words without immediately personalizing them, recognizing that their speech is a manifestation of their own clouds, their own suffering. When we speak from this place of calm clarity, our words are more likely to be wise and helpful. When we listen from this spaciousness, we are able to truly hear. Mindful communication, then, is the practice of interbeing made manifest. It is a daily opportunity to weave threads of understanding and connection, rather than threads of isolation and discord. It is not about becoming a perfect, saintly communicator overnight. It is a practice, full of mistakes and opportunities to learn. It is about bringing a clear intention to our interactions, an intention to listen deeply and to speak from a place of kindness and truth. By doing so, we can heal wounds in our relationships, prevent new ones from forming, and build our connections with others on the solid ground of trust, respect, and genuine understanding. This practice of bringing such profound awareness to our interactions with others is a model for how we can bring mindfulness to all areas of our life. But how do we maintain this quality of presence when we are not on the meditation cushion or in a deep conversation, but are instead caught in the whirlwind of a busy, demanding day? How do we weave this golden thread of awareness into the very fabric of our ordinary existence? This leads us to the art of integrating our practice into the whole of our daily life. We have traveled far on this inner journey, exploring the landscape of the mind, learning to navigate its weather, and cultivating the heart's most beautiful qualities. We have touched upon profound truths and learned gentle, powerful practices. A natural question may now arise. This is all very well for a quiet, contemplative setting, but how do I bring this peace into my actual life? My life is a whirlwind of deadlines, family responsibilities, traffic jams, and constant demands. How can I be the sky when I am stuck in the storm? This is the most important question of all, for the ultimate aim of this path is not to become a skilled meditator who can find peace on a cushion. The goal is to become a wise and compassionate human being who can find peace in the midst of life's chaos. The goal is to bring the sky into the world. This is the art of integration, of dissolving the artificial boundary between our practice and our life until they become one and the same. The first and most transformative step in this integration is to reframe our understanding of what practice is. We must let go of the idea that meditation only happens when we are sitting in a special posture, in a quiet room, with our eyes closed. That is formal practice, and it is vitally important, but it is only one part of the path. The real laboratory, the true meditation hall, is our life itself. Every single moment of our day, no matter how mundane or how challenging, is an opportunity to practice. Washing the dishes is an opportunity to feel the warm water on our hands and be present with a simple task. Waiting in line at the post office is an opportunity to notice our impatience and come back to our breath. A difficult meeting at work is a rich opportunity to observe our own reactivity, to notice the ego's desire to be right, and to practice communicating with clarity and kindness. These moments are not interruptions to our spiritual life. They are our spiritual life. The goal is not to escape from the complexities of our life to find peace, but to find peace right in the very heart of those complexities. To help us bridge the gap between formal practice and our busy day, we can learn to sprinkle our environment with what the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh calls bells of mindfulness. These are not necessarily physical bells. A bell of mindfulness is any sound, object, or recurring event in our day that we can use as a signal to pause, even for just a moment, and come back home to ourselves. You can choose your own bells. For example, you can decide that every time the telephone rings, you will not immediately snatch it up. Instead, you will let the first ring be your bell. You will pause, take one conscious in-breath and out-breath, and then answer the phone from a place of slightly more calm and presence. You can decide that every time you stop at a red light while driving, it is a bell of mindfulness. Instead of tapping your fingers impatiently on the steering wheel, you can use that minute to relax your shoulders, feel your body in the seat, and simply be aware of your breathing. The moment becomes a gift of stillness, not a frustrating delay. You can use countless other things as your anchors to the present. The first sip of your morning coffee or tea can be a bell. Instead of drinking on autopilot while already scrolling through your phone, you can take that first sip with your full attention, noticing the warmth of the cup, the aroma, and the taste. The frame of a doorway can be a bell. Every time you walk through one, you can use it as a reminder to check in with your posture and your presence. The sound of a siren, a child's laugh, the feeling of the wind on your skin, any of these can become your secret signal to pause, breathe, and remember that you are the sky. By peppering our day with these tiny moments of stopping, we break the hypnotic spell of our own busyness. We are like a diver who periodically comes to the surface to take a breath of fresh air. These micro-practices re-anchor us in the present moment and prevent us from getting completely lost in the storm of our to-do lists and worries. While these informal, moment-to-moment practices are the way we live the wisdom, it is the formal, dedicated practice of sitting meditation that builds the foundation. Think of it like a musician. A great pianist does not only perform in concerts, they spend countless hours alone, practicing scales and strengthening their fingers. Formal meditation is our time for practicing the scales of the mind. It is the dedicated time we set aside, even if it is just for 5 or 10 minutes each day, to specifically train and strengthen the muscle of our mindfulness. In the quiet of our formal practice, we build a reservoir of calm, clarity, and stability. Then, during the challenges of our day, we can draw upon this inner reserve. Without this regular training, it is very difficult to remember to be mindful when we are stressed, angry, or afraid. The formal sit is our gym, where we develop the strength we need for the marathon of daily life. In this, consistency is far more important than intensity. It is much more beneficial to practice for 10 minutes every single day than it is to practice for 2 hours once a month. The mind is rewired through patient, consistent, and gentle repetition. Every time you sit, you are strengthening wholesome neural pathways. Every time you bring your wandering mind back to the breath, you are reinforcing the habit of presence over the habit of distraction. There is a wonderful parable about a young, strong woodcutter who was challenged to a wood-chopping contest by an older, seemingly frailer man. The contest began, and the young woodcutter chopped with immense energy, barely stopping to wipe the sweat from his brow. He looked over and saw the old man chopping for about 50 minutes, and then stopping for 10 minutes of rest. The young man scoffed, thinking the old man was lazy and wasting valuable time. This pattern continued all day. At sunset, when the wood was tallied, everyone was stunned to find that the old man had chopped a significantly larger pile of wood. The young man, exhausted and bewildered, went to the old man and asked, "How is this possible? I am stronger, younger, and I hardly took a break. Yet you have chopped more than me. What is your secret?" The old man smiled and replied, "It's simple. Every time I stopped, it was to sharpen my axe." Our formal meditation practice is the act of sharpening our axe. In our productivity-obsessed culture, to sit still and do nothing for 10 minutes can feel like a waste of time. But this could not be further from the truth. By taking the time to sharpen the tool of our own awareness, we make all of our other activities more effective, efficient, and easeful. We work with more focus. We solve problems with more clarity, and we navigate our relationships with more skill and less friction. We learn to work smarter, not just harder. By weaving together the dedicated training of formal meditation with the spontaneous, in-the-moment practice of our mindfulness anchors, we begin to dissolve the separation between our practice and our life. Peace is no longer something we have to go away on a retreat to find. It becomes the very ground on which we walk, the very air that we breathe. It is a quality of presence that we can bring to any activity, no matter how simple or how complex. As we learn to integrate this profound awareness into the very texture of our daily lives, a fundamental shift begins to occur. The restless, anxious search for freedom and happiness starts to fall away, not because we have finally found it, but because we realize it was here all along, hidden beneath the noise of our own minds. What then is the nature of this ultimate peace? Where does this path of integration finally lead? It leads to the discovery of a freedom that is not dependent on any external condition, a peace that cannot be given and cannot be taken away. It leads us to the heart of what it means to be truly free. And so, we arrive at the summit. We have walked the winding path from the initial recognition of our own unease, through the deep valleys of our most challenging emotions, and up the sunlit slopes of compassion, joy, and equanimity. We have learned to integrate this practice into the very fabric of our daily lives, transforming each moment into an opportunity for awakening. Where does this journey ultimately lead? It does not lead to a heavenly realm or a distant paradise. It leads us back to where we always were, but with eyes that can finally see. It leads to the realization of a freedom that was here all along, obscured by the clouds of our own minds. It leads to the discovery of true inner freedom. This freedom is perhaps the most misunderstood concept on the spiritual path. In the ordinary sense, we think of freedom as the ability to do whatever we want, to get whatever we desire, to be free from all problems and difficulties. This worldly freedom is fragile, temporary, and completely dependent on external conditions being exactly to our liking. The freedom we discover on this path is of a radically different nature. It is not freedom from the circumstances of life, but freedom within them. It is not the absence of difficult emotions, but the state of no longer being a slave to them. The ultimate freedom is not a life without any clouds in the sky. It is the realization that we are the sky, and therefore we are not afraid of any weather. The fires of greed, hatred, and delusion may be extinguished, but the heart remains alive, open, and responsive to the fullness of life. For most of our lives, we exist in a state of constant negotiation with reality, frantically trying to manage the weather of our experience. When the sun of happiness, success, or pleasure is shining, we run out and try to grasp its rays, desperate to hold onto the warmth, anxious about the moment it will fade. When the first drops of rain begin to fall, the rain of sadness, loss, or disappointment, we immediately scramble for an umbrella. We open the umbrella of distraction, diving into work or entertainment. We open the umbrella of denial, pretending we don't feel the rain. We open the umbrella of aversion, complaining about the rain and wishing for the sun. We live in a state of perpetual anxiety about the forecast, and we exhaust ourselves trying to stay dry. Inner freedom is the courageous and liberating realization that we do not need the umbrella. It is the willingness to step out from under our shelters and feel the totality of life directly. It is the ability to feel the warmth of the sun on our skin without the anxious need to cling to it, and the willingness to feel the cool rain on our face without the bitter resistance to it. It is not that we suddenly learn to enjoy pain, but we finally stop creating the second arrow of suffering. We stop adding the immense pain of our resistance to the unavoidable discomforts of life. We learn to welcome all experiences, the pleasant and the unpleasant, the light and the dark, with the same spacious and equanimous heart, because we know with unshakable certainty that we, the sky, cannot be stained or broken by any passing cloud. This leads to the end of a lifelong habit, the habit of postponing our peace. We live in the delusion of, if only I had more money, then I would be at peace. If only I could find the right partner, then I would be happy. If only my health were better, then I could finally relax. We are constantly making our inner well-being conditional upon a future set of perfect circumstances that may never arrive. We hold our own peace hostage. Inner freedom is the demolition of this if-only prison. It is the profound discovery that peace is available right now, in this moment, exactly as it is. It is not found in the absence of problems, but in our ability to be with our problems, with a calm, clear, and compassionate mind. It is the cessation of the argument with reality. We stop demanding that life conform to our ego's preferences. This is not a passive resignation or a state of defeat. It is an empowered, vibrant, and fully engaged presence with what is real. It is the end of the war and the beginning of true peace. When this inner war ceases, we begin to live with a new kind of confidence, a quiet fearlessness. In the Buddhist tradition, this is sometimes compared to the confidence of a lion. In the jungle, most animals are in a constant state of alert. A deer is startled by the snap of every twig, its nervous system wired for flight. But the lion, the king of the jungle, walks with a serene and majestic power. It is not that the lion does not hear the sounds of the jungle. It is simply that it is not frightened by them. It knows its own nature. It rests in its own strength. The person who has realized inner freedom develops this lion's roar fearlessness. This is not the arrogance of the ego, which is always brittle and defensive. It is a deep, quiet confidence that comes from no longer identifying with the fragile, frightened self. You are no longer afraid of the sounds of the world, the worldly winds of praise and blame, gain and loss, because you are resting in a truth that is deeper and more vast than any passing phenomenon. You are no longer a deer, startled by every cloud. You are the sky itself, resting in its own boundless nature. This is the ultimate destination of the path we have walked together. It is a journey that leads us back to a home we never truly left. It is the realization that the peace we were seeking in the distance was the very ground beneath our feet. It is the freedom to live with a heart that is completely open and a mind that is completely at peace, welcoming every moment of this precious, mysterious, and beautiful life, no matter what clouds may come or go. We began this journey together in the heart of a storm, feeling lost and overwhelmed, believing ourselves to be the fragile cloud tossed about by the relentless winds of life. We felt the sting of anxiety, the heat of anger, and the heavy weight of sorrow, convinced that these states were our very identity. Our journey has been one of a gradual and profound awakening. We learned to shift our perspective, to lift our gaze from the turbulent weather, and recognize, for the first time, the vast, open, and untouched sky of our own awareness. We walked a path that taught us to see the impermanent nature of all our experiences, to understand how our own clinging to pleasure and aversion to pain was the true source of our suffering. We cultivated the gentle light of mindfulness to see our minds clearly, the warmth of compassion to heal our own hearts, and the unshakable stability of equanimity to stand firm in the face of life's inevitable storms. We have traveled from a state of helpless reaction to one of conscious, caring response, not by changing the world outside, but by transforming the world within. The ultimate truth we have uncovered on this path is both simple and revolutionary. Peace is not a destination we must strive to reach. It is not a prize to be won after a long and arduous battle. It is not the attainment of a life free from problems, a sky forever empty of clouds. True and lasting peace is the realization of what you have been all along. It is the quiet, unshakable, knowing that you are the sky, not the cloud. Peace is the inner spaciousness that can hold both the brilliance of joy and the darkness of grief with the same unconditional, loving embrace. It is the freedom that comes from no longer warring with your own experience, no longer demanding that life be other than it is. This peace is not held in a future, perfected version of yourself. It is available to you right now, in this very moment, accessible through the simple, humble gateway of a single conscious breath. And so, we leave you here, at the beginning of your own clear sky. The tools are in your hands. The wisdom is in your heart. You have everything you need. The sky of your true nature is not something you must build. You must only remember that it is there. It has been there all along, waiting patiently behind the clouds. The next time a storm gathers on the horizon of your mind, the next time you feel the winds of fear or the rains of sadness begin, you do not need to be afraid. You do not need to run. You can pause. You can breathe. You can feel the solid ground beneath you, and you can remember the vast, open, and peaceful sky that you are. Welcome the weather. It is a visitor. It is not your home. Your home is the sky itself, and it is here that you will find your truest and most lasting peace.